Chapter 1172. Heaven and Earth Farmland. Bufong's mind flickered, and he entered it. Today, the farmland had almost become Bufong's little world. Bufong could enter it at any time. Of course, wherever he entered, he would come out from. This was the law of the plain. The Heaven and Earth farmland was very peaceful. A leisurely breeze was blowing. Bufong landed on the ground and soon landed in the bushes. The air was filled with a tranquil fragrance, like the fragrance of immortal ingredients and immortal herbs. Bufong looked up. In front of the wooden house in the distance, a big tree grew. It was the Heaven Tree, which was bred from the seed of the Heaven Tree. It was somewhat similar to the Heaven Chief of the Heaven Chief realm. However, compared to the majestic Heaven Tree of the Heaven Chief realm, this Heaven Tree looked much smaller. Of course, it didn't have the immortal energy of the Heaven Tree of the Heaven Chief realm. However, Bufong could feel it. Since the birth of the Heaven Tree, the atmosphere of the entire farmland had changed. It was as if it had a backbone. This feeling was especially strong. Although the previous farmland wasn't bad, it was scattered and disorderly. Although Bufong and Johan-san had tried their best to arrange the farmland, each position was planned to plant the immortal ingredients and spirit herbs. However, it was still lacking something, and the birth of the Heaven Tree was like the finishing touch. Of course, there was also the change of the river. The source of the spring of life was placed in the river, so the water flowing out of the river was full of vitality. The creatures in the farmland had become much stronger. Bufong was very satisfied. With his hands clasped, he walked forward. Not long after, he arrived in front of the wooden house. In front of the wooden hut, Johan-san was lazily lying on a chair. The Heaven Tree blocked the sunlight, but it still gave off a relaxing and comfortable atmosphere. Bufong glanced at Johan-san, who was snoring like thunder. Instead of waking him up, he walked into the river. He snapped his fingers. Boom! There was an explosion in the river. Suddenly, the little silver dragon came out and quickly circled in front of Bufong, swinging its tail. The little silver dragon seemed to be very happy with Bufong's appearance and kept rolling around. Bufong stretched out his finger and stroked the little silver dragon. He opened his palm, and on his palm were 2 dim seeds of the immortal tree. "I'll have to trouble you again." Bufong poked the little silver dragon and said. The little silver dragon landed on Bufong's palm, looking confused. Seeing the Heaven Tree seeds, the little silver dragon cupped the seeds and swallowed them. With a gulp, a seed entered its stomach, causing little Silver's body to swell up. However, the little silver dragon didn't seem to give up. He grabbed the other seed and swallowed it. His whole body seemed to be about to explode. The corners of Bufong's mouth twitched. Looking at the charmingly naive little silver dragon, he found it quite interesting. The little silver dragon was the source of the spring of life, and the life force it contained was incomparably thick. Soon, the 2 Heaven Tree seeds were spat out by the little silver dragon, which had a layer of silver substance moving over them. That silver substance was overflowing with light, and bits of vitality seeped into the seeds. The seeds immediately shone brightly. "Oh, Owner Boo, where did you get these 2 seeds?" No one knew when Johan-san had appeared behind Bufong. His sudden voice startled Bufong. Bufong turned his head, looking at Johan-san with an expressionless face, which made the latter dumbfounded. "These seeds are a set. However, these 2 seeds can't be planted in the Heaven and Earth farmland. It's also not suitable to plant 3 Heaven Tree seeds," Bufong said. Johan-san nodded. After staying in the Heaven and Earth farmland for so long, he naturally knew how tolerant the farmland was. The Heaven Tree seeds were too extraordinary. If 3 were planted, they could usurp the host and invade the farmland's will of the Great Path. If that happened, it would not be a good thing for the farmland. It would become a bad thing. The 2 seeds regained their vitality. Bufong grasped them in his hand. Using his finger to rub the little silver dragon's head, the latter happily jumped in Bufong's palm. Then, it suddenly jumped into the river. As soon as it entered the river, it turned into a giant dragon. With a swing of its tail, it dove into the depths of the river. It set off ripples. Bufong grabbed the seeds, gently exhaling. Nyohan-san, study the death food tools. After a period of time, I will draw many gourmet arrays. Now, you need to help me find suitable ingredients. Bufong said. Nyohan-san was bewildered. He seemed to be a little puzzled by the urgency in Bufong's voice. Nodding, Nyohan-san didn't dare to be negligent. It just so happened that he had nothing to do during this period of time. Then Bufong said something to Nyohan-san, then turned around and left the farmland. Rumble. The Lord Go narrowed his dog eyes and looked outside the nether prison city wall. Over there seemed to be a supreme aura bursting out. Ha ha ha. Mangy dog, you don't dare to make a move, do you? In the sky, the heaven chief little saint also understood the Lord Go's strength, and it could even be said that he recognized this dog. This was the dog that had turned the nether prison upside down. This dog was very terrifying. Even among the great sage, it was very strong. However, now that he was leading the army to attack the Heaven Chief realm, this dog wouldn't dare to make a move. After all, the Heaven Chief realm was not Earth Prison. If this dog made a move, it would certainly force the supreme existence of the 9 Revolution Nether Chef clan to make a move. If the Heaven Chief realm turned into a battlefield with the strength of the 2 great sage, the entire Heaven Chief realm might be destroyed. It should be noted that the great sage was many times stronger than the little saint. After becoming a great sage, he could step out of the realm and walk in the starry sky. He was a real, supreme existence. At most, the little saint could only borrow the will of the great path to stay in the starry sky for a short time. Obviously, the Lord Go understood that. If the great sage behind him made a move, the whole Heaven Chief realm might be destroyed. However, the Lord Go doesn't like the look of you. Lord Dog's magnetic voice reverberated in the void, exploding all of a sudden. The next moment, the dog paw slapped out again. But this time, the exquisite dog paw had changed. It was filled with terrifying heavenly will, the heavenly will that belonged to hell. The will of the great path swirled in the paw, making it stronger and stronger. The nether chef little saint in midair froze. Before he could react, he was hit by the paw of the Lord Go. He was knocked down from the sky and smashed to the ground with a loud boom. This paw didn't kill the little saint. However, the little saint's face was covered in dirt from the bombardment. Ew. The little saint was so aggrieved. He pointed at the Lord Go, glaring at him. He had the support of the great sage, a 9 Revolution Nether chef, so he wasn't afraid of the Lord Go. What about you? The Lord Go doesn't like you, so he can't beat you? Tell the guy behind you to come out and fight with the Lord Go. The Lord Go twitched his mouth. The Heaven Chief little saint was so angry and aggrieved. Behind the Lord Go, Realm Lord Detai guffawed, flipping his blonde hair. What are you laughing at? He's just a loser. Well, why does he have to laugh? The Heaven Chief little saint looked at the Realm Lord Dit coldly. The Realm Lord Dit was unhappy. If you have the ability to fight one-on-one, I won't even recognize your father. You're just a despicable man who wants to take advantage of others. How dare you laugh at me? The Realm Lord Dit looked at the little saint. Swoosh! The other little saint also flew into the sky. Then, he met up with the little saint. Where's the little chef? You didn't catch him? The little saint looked at the other little saint, widening his eyes. The Realm Lord little saint had caught a 9-star, true immortal realm expert, but the other had escaped. The Realm Lord little saint didn't explain anything. Was he going to say that he saw the little chef being slapped away by a dog as a companion? He was so shocked that he let the little chef escape. If he said that, their friendship would capsize at any moment. Buzz, all of a sudden, a wave of mysterious energy rippled out. The 2 little saints narrowed their eyes and looked down at the ground. There, Bufong appeared out of nowhere. Bufong was holding 2 seeds in his hands, which emitted immense vitality and thick immortal energy. It's a sacred-grade immortal ingredient, the seeds of the heaven tree. The 2 little saints' eyes shrank, taking in cold breaths. The Realm Lord Dit's eyes were also attracted. Looking at the 2 seeds of the heaven tree in Bufong's hands, he couldn't help but shiver. The seeds of the heaven tree were full of vitality, They were the hope of the Heaven Chief realm. Are the seeds of the Heaven Tree alive? The Realm Lord Dit asked, his voice trembling. They're alive. Bufong nodded. A moment later, he flicked his fingers, and the two seeds flew out, falling into the Realm Lord Dit's hands. Boom! In the void, the two little saints moved. In a flash, they shot out, and the void was crushed by their feet. You dare to come again? The Lord Go glared, raising his exquisite dog paw, about to wave at the two little saints. However, as soon as he raised his paw, a terrifying aura shot out from the nether prison city wall. The Lord Go's paw paused. A moment later, you still want to take advantage of me? Do you really think that you, the Lord Go, are easy to bully? The Lord Go roared. Thick nether energy quickly gathered. A moment later, it turned into a huge earth prison dog. Its body was surrounded by the burning, pitch-black earth prison flame. Its body shot out as if it had teleported. With 3 teleportations, it crossed the Heaven Nether Bridge, entering the Bronze Gate. Then, behind the Bronze Gate, earth-shaking battle cries rang out. The two little saints didn't think that the black dog would directly pass them. It didn't put them in its eyes. However, they didn't care. Instead, they were wild with joy. Go, take the seeds of the Heaven Tree, and the mission is completed. The two little saints roared at the same time. Their figures burst out with extreme speed, charging toward the Realm Lord Dit. Bufong looked at the little saint, then at the Realm Lord Dit, gently exhaling. The seeds have been revived. The hope you mentioned, does it have a chance to sprout? Bufong asked. The Realm Lord Dit's mouth rose, his face full of excitement. Give me the time it takes to brew a cup of tea, the Realm Lord Dit said. Bufong nodded, then turned his head, clasped his hands behind his back, and stepped in front of the Realm Lord Dit. In the distance, the two little saints sped over. You want to stop us? Without that great weapon, how can you stop us? The two little saints roared. They didn't put Bufong, who couldn't use the perishing pot, in their eyes at all. Bufong twitched his mouth. How do you know that I can't use the perishing pot? Bufong said lightly. His voice wasn't loud, but it was heard by the two little saints. The two froze, then their eyes shrank. Because of Bufong, with a shake of his hand, a silver perishing pot appeared in his hand. The silver pot spun, steam rising from it. At the bottom of the pot, a white flame was burning. It was indeed a perishing pot. This little chef can use the perishing pot. The two little saints were taken aback. They gasped and shuddered as they recalled the scene where the giant devil was blown to bits by the perishing pot, leaving only bones behind. Without hesitation, they stopped moving. Fiddling with the perishing pot in his hand, Bufong paced back and forth with his hands clasped behind his back. The atmosphere suddenly became stagnant. As soon as the perishing pot appeared, everyone was frightened, and they didn't even dare to breathe loudly. After pacing for a while, he put away the perishing pot with a flip of his hand. Oh! The two little saints looked at each other and instantly understood that the boy couldn't use the perishing pot. He must have been bluffing just now. Damn it. Go! The two little saints looked at each other and roared. Then, they sped toward Bufong. However, as soon as they moved, their pupils constricted again, because they saw Bufong take out the F*King perishing pot again. At this moment, the two little saints only had one word left in their minds. What's the point of being so naughty? Not only did Bufong take out the perishing pot, but he also took out a fruit filled with life, energy, and stuffed it into his mouth. Now, they didn't dare to attack again. The two little saints were so depressed that they almost vomited blood. Bufong glanced at the two little saints and twitched the corner of his mouth. His mind flickered. Another perishing pot appeared. 2 perishing pots hovered in Bufong's hands, glowing with a silver light, steaming hot air, and a rich aroma. Guess if I can make the perishing pot explode. With 1 pot in each hand, Bufong raised his head and looked at the two little saints in midair. The two little saints were speechless, and for a moment, they didn't dare to bet. Who knew if Bufong, who had eaten the fruit filled with life energy, could make the perishing pot work? Behind Bufong, Realm Lord Dit dug a deep pit in the ground and carefully planted the 2 golden heaven tree seeds. After covering them with soil, Realm Lord Dit punched himself in the chest. His face turned pale in an instant. Blood sprayed out of his mouth and sprinkled on the place where the seeds were buried. Immediately, a terrible life energy surged like a dragon. A touch of green broke through the soil. The moment this green appeared, the whole Heaven Chief realm suddenly changed dramatically. The moment Bufong sensed the green, the corner of his mouth twitched. With a flip of his hand, he put away the two perishing pots. Using the perishing pots to show off had put a lot of pressure on him. After putting away the pots, Bufong looked at the two little saints and grinned. I really can't make the perishing pots explode. You guessed it right. Congratulations. Bufong said seriously. The two little saints looked at each other. In the end, they were so angry that they coughed up blood. With AF Astra's king tricked. Chapter 1173. If Bufong asked them if they were angry, even if the two little saints had to die, they would beat Bufong up. It was so annoying. How could they scare people like that? Playing with two perishing pots in his hands. That kind of thing is very scary, okay? If it accidentally exploded, then it would be the end of their lives. Of course, Bufong didn't care about the emotions of the two little saints. What he needed to do was to buy time so that Realm Lord Dit could plant the seed of the Heaven Tree and let the Heaven Tree sprout. Of course, he didn't think about what would happen next. Realm Lord Ditai's face was filled with excitement as he looked at the green sprouts bursting out of the ground. He couldn't help but look excited. He reached out his hand, hovering above the tender green sprout. A big hole appeared in his palm, from which thick blood kept flowing, dripping into the tender sprout on the ground. That tender sprout crazily absorbed Realm Lord Dit's blood. This scene made people's hair stand on end. However, at this moment, the aura of the entire Heaven Chief realm changed dramatically. The originally declining Heaven Chief realm seemed to be revived at this moment. Dense heaven and earth spirit energy was produced at this moment. Rumble. A violent tremor broke out. The entire Heaven Chief realm shook. In the fifth layer of the immortal cooking realm, the wreckage of the immortal tree vanished in an instant, turning into tiny particles that kept drifting away. Not only the fifth floor of Heaven Chief realm, but also the fourth floor, the third floor, the second floor, the first floor, they were all like this. At this moment, the withered remains of the Heaven Tree suddenly cracked, turning into tiny particles that were blown away by the wind. Only a huge, deep hole was left in the ground. At this moment, the entire Heaven Chief realm fell into a complete silence. Everyone stared blankly at the disappearing immortal tree. They were dumbfounded, and their hearts trembled. The Heaven Tree was the hope of every expert in the Heaven Chief realm. But now, this hope had actually disappeared. Dressed in a long robe, Meng Chi stood on the city wall, looking at the disappearing Heaven Tree with a sense of loss. Did he fail? The Heaven Chief realm was still heading towards destruction and death? Suddenly, Meng Chi was slightly taken aback. She stretched out her hand, and her spiritual energy surged out as she began to sense the changes in the spiritual energy between heaven and earth. Unlike before, the destruction of the Heaven Tree didn't cause the entire Heaven Chief realm to collapse. Instead, the spiritual energy of heaven and earth seemed to be recovering. Meng Chi's eyes flashed as she raised her fair palm. In his palm, energy continued to gather, turning into an energy ball. The energy ball had immortal chi swirling around it. The immortal chi was so familiar that it made Meng Chi a bit sluggish. Then, Meng Chi's red lips curved into a happy smile. Rumble. At the spot where the Heaven Tree had collapsed, a new seedling began to grow. A rumbling sound rang out. The next moment, the seedling began to grow rapidly, and in just a flash, it had pierced through heaven and earth. Although it was not as magnificent as the previous Heaven Tree, it still had a touch of mysterious beauty. The reborn Heaven Tree contained a tremendous life force that was not there before. It's the Heaven Tree. The Heaven Tree has come back to life. I can feel a strong life force. The spiritual energy of heaven and earth. The spiritual energy of heaven and earth has recovered. The immortal chefs in the third layer of the immortal city were so excited that they danced with joy. Everyone revealed a look of surprise and excitement. They were so happy that they didn't know what to say to express their emotions at this moment. Some even cried tears of joy. They didn't know what losing the heaven tree meant to them. However, they knew that the days when the heaven tree was on the verge of death were the darkest days of the heaven chief realm. The fifth floor of heaven chief realm, because of a great battle, the fourth and fifth layers had completely fused together. The heaven tree soared into the sky, directly piercing through the two layers. The ground of the fifth layer was in a mess, with rubble rolling everywhere. The ground had been overturned, which was enough to show how terrible the battle was. In front of Dit's realm lord, a touch of green suddenly grew. After sacrificing so much blood, the heaven tree suddenly turned into a giant creature, soaring into the sky. The lush, umbrella-like leaves spread, rustling and colliding with each other. The entire fifth floor of Heaven Chief Realm seemed to be enveloped by the entire heaven tree. Suddenly, a strong life force spread out from it. The Heaven Chief Realm had come back to life. The heaven tree had come back to life. The heaven tree had come back to life. The two little saints of the 9 Revolution Nether Chef's clan looked at each other and saw the shock in each other's eyes. The next moment, they sped away without hesitation, heading toward the place where the heaven tree was coming back to life. They had to cut down the heaven tree before the heaven tree fully came back to life. In this way, the foundation of the Heaven Chief Realm would be destroyed, and they would have a chance to obtain the seed of the heaven tree. This kind of sacred-grade, immortal ingredient should be planted in the garden of the 9 Revolution Nether Chef's clan. Only then could it bring out its full effect. Bufong glanced at the two little saints who were about to go berserk, then at the growing heaven tree. The corner of Bufong's mouth twitched. It seems you have to keep guessing whether I can blow up this dried pot or not. With the dried pot in his hand, Bufong stood in front of the two little saints and spoke again. The faces of the two little saints darkened instantly. This guy is doing this on purpose. Get lost, one of the little saints cursed. He roared at Bufong. However, the next moment, his pupils constricted. That was because Bufong had taken out another spirit fruit of life, filled with life force, and stuffed it into his mouth. The aura of life exploded. Guess again, Bufong said. Guess my ass. You're courting death. One of the little saints flew into a rage. With a stomp, his body turned into thousands of streams of light and appeared in front of Bufong in a flash. Terrible waves of air stirred up. The mighty pressure seemed to push Bufong to the ground. Bufong focused his eyes. Suddenly, behind him, the heaven tree swayed and seemed to emit thousands of rays of light. The rustling sound of the leaves rubbing against each other sounded like the whispers of a powerful existence. In front of Bufong, the little saint furiously pushed out his palm. This palm contained endless power. If it hit Bufong, without the invincibility of the vermilion robe, Bufong might really be seriously injured. However, this time, Bufong did not even need to use the invincibility of the vermilion robe. A branch suddenly broke out from the ground. Like a sharp spear, it instantly pierced through the air, piercing toward the little saint. The little saint's heart trembled. His pupils constricted. He stopped attacking Bufong, and his figure suddenly turned into countless illusions, disappearing from his spot. The branch that broke out of the ground was overflowing with colorful light, as if it was blooming with 7-colored light. The little saint sucked in a breath of cold air, his pupils constricting. Boom! An explosive sound rang out. The ground kept breaking. The minor saint was moving in the void. Branches that looked like spears were constantly shooting out, releasing whistling sounds and tearing the sky apart. The two little saints did not dare to stop. They quickly moved in the air to dodge. They tried their best to avoid these branches. Buzz, the heaven tree, seemed to have a spirit. Branches shot out from the ground, and branches fell from the trees as well. The branches on the tree were even more powerful. They fiercely whipped out, causing the void to crack. Each whip was not weaker than the attack of a Saint Realm expert. The heaven tree was like a powerful, supreme existence. Realm Lord Dit looked at it and suddenly laughed. His laughter was full of joy. The grievances he had suffered for so many days were completely released at this moment. You bully my Heaven Chief Realm. You bully my Realm Lord Dit. Come on. Realm Lord Dit's body was extremely weak. His face was pale. He had lost too much blood, and he was seriously injured. At this moment, he was very weak. However, he was extremely excited. The once invincible Heaven Tree had returned. As the ruler of the Heaven Chief Realm, Realm Lord Dit could clearly feel that the current Heaven Tree was nurturing an incomparably powerful force, which was even stronger than the previous Heaven Tree. The hope of the Heaven Chief Realm. It had finally returned. How dare a loser be so arrogant? If you come out, I will kill you. The Heaven Chief Little Saint's eyes were full of killing intent. However, his body was forced to move by the branches that had broken out of the ground. Moreover, as time passed, the power contained in the branches seemed to become more and more terrifying. Bufong looked at the two little saints who were moving, holding the perishing pot expressionlessly. Here's the question. Can you guess if I can make the perishing pot explode? Bufong said. The little saint's face darkened when he heard Bufong's words. This guy must be crazy. He kept asking questions. Did he really think that the little saint, were fools? It really made people want to slap him in the face. The little saint was so angry that his heart was in a mess. Then puff. His body was instantly pierced. Because his mental force was not concentrated enough, the Heaven Tree's branches seized the opportunity and directly pierced his body. The gigantic branch of the immortal tree pierced through the little saint and swung it with a terrifying force, causing the little saint to be flung around in the void. He coughed up blood. The will of the great path emanating from the Heaven Tree's branches kept destroying the little saint's body. At the same time, the will of the great path of the Heaven Chief Realm was constantly recovering and perfecting itself. HHH. The little saint let out an unwilling roar. His clothes were stained with blood. Drops of the little saint's blood drifted down from the sky, but they were constantly absorbed by the Heaven Tree. It made the Heaven Tree stronger and stronger. The other little saint was scared out of his wits. He turned and was about to run away. However, how could the confused little saint stop the increasingly powerful Heaven Tree? Puff! The immortal tree's branches shot out once again, piercing through his body. Blood splattered across the sky. Down below, all the Nether Prison experts couldn't help but suck in a cold breath. It was too horrible. Those were the little saint's existences, but the little saint was pierced by a tree without being able to fight back. As time went by, what frightened them even more was the two little saints' bodies kept drying up, and their essence was completely absorbed by the Heaven Tree's branches. In the end, it completely scattered like a speck of dust. The two little saints, they died at the same time. Bufong's eyes couldn't help but narrow. He could feel the terror of the Heaven Tree. If the Heaven Tree went on a killing spree, who could stop it? Fortunately, the Heaven Tree seemed to have a spirit. It didn't go on a killing spree. It only killed the two little saint before withdrawing all its branches. No, not all of them, though. A dazzling golden branch swayed in the air, as if it was about to shatter the void. The next moment, the branch streaked across the sky, tearing through heaven and earth. With a swoosh, the branch crossed the 5th floor of Heaven Chief Realm. It crossed the Heaven Nether Bridge. Then it swept out and hit the Nether Prison city wall. With a loud bang, the city wall trembled continuously from the attack. A terrible battle was breaking out behind the city wall. The branch lashed out, passing through the bronze door and joining the battle. The next moment, a furious roar rang out from behind the city wall. The roar shook the sky. The whole 5th floor of Heaven Chief Realm seemed to be shaking and collapsing. A dog, a tree, how dare you bully me like this? The Nether Chef clan expert roared furiously. It seemed that the Heaven Tree's branch had joined the battle, turning the tide of the battle around. Rumble. There seemed to be a thunderclap. Saint blood splattered. The next moment, accompanied by a heart-wrenching roar, the sound of limbs breaking shook the world. It was a long time before the sound faded away. The great sage won't let you off like this. Next time, I'll cut down the tree and slaughter the dog." A slightly flustered and exasperated voice rang out in the distance, gradually fading away. A ripping sound rang out. The heaven tree's branch pulled back. Saint blood flashed on the heaven tree's branch, as if it had drunk a lot of it. Then, a black figure walked over from outside the city wall. With a white leg of lamb in his mouth, Lord Go happily walked back with graceful cat-like steps. The leg of lamb exuded surging energy, so bright that it seemed to blind people. Lord Go landed on the ground. Soon, he appeared in front of Bufong. The leg of lamb was thrown to the ground. Lord Go grinned at Bufong. "Bufong boy, Lord Go has found you a good ingredient, the leg of the great sage goat," Lord Go said, smacking his lips. Bufong also froze for a moment, then his eyes lit up. This was the legendary great sage ingredient. The heaven tree's branch pulled back. The nether prison experts in the heaven chief realm all felt their hair stand on end. In the next moment, as the heaven tree's branch swung again, those nether prison experts seemed to have lost their souls, frantically running in the direction of the bronze gate. The heaven nether bridge was packed with people. Some people even fell under the bridge, swallowed by the boundless darkness. In just a moment, the nether prison experts in the heaven chief realm all retreated. Behind the bronze gate, the powerful spies also hid themselves. With the recovery of the heaven tree, the plan to invade the heaven chief realm and plunder the heaven tree seed will be put on hold. But now that the bronze gate had lost its seal, the nether prison experts could cross over at any time. The crisis of the heaven chief realm still hung over everyone's heads. Chapter 1174. The heaven tree was destroyed and then rebuilt. Its essence was contained in the seed of the heaven tree, looking forward to the day it broke through the soil. Originally, the immortal tree had been continuously decaying. However, after being destroyed and rebuilt, the immortal tree had obtained endless vitality. Bufong looked at the swaying seed of the heaven tree, which was emitting a mighty life force and immortal energy, and couldn't help but show a look of surprise. He didn't expect that the heaven tree could recover to this state in an instant and become the pillar that supported the heaven chief realm again. This was somewhat rare. Moreover, with the resurrection of the heaven tree, the immortal energy in the whole heaven chief realm had become much denser, and the will of the great path had become complete. The people in the heaven chief realm could feel the recovery of power. On the 5th floor of heaven chief realm, all the nether prison experts had left the 5th floor. The heaven tree dropped a branch and smashed it on the bronze gate. The branch was full of mysterious patterns, and there was even a strange sound of Sanskrit swirling around it, making the nether prison experts behind the gate afraid to take a step forward. The branch of the heaven tree was extremely terrifying. It could even pierce through a little saint expert and absorb his life essence. How could the others dare to offend the heaven tree? Therefore, the crisis of the heaven chief realm was over for the time being. Next, the whole heaven chief realm would enter a long period of recuperation. However, it was conceivable. After this crisis, Realm Lord Dit, who had grown a lot, would certainly not allow the heaven chief realm to grow freely like before. He had to let the mini heaven chief realm go through real hardships. Only in this way, when the next crisis came, the experts of the whole heaven chief realm would not be as useless as this time. Chef's challenge must be carried out, and not only Chef's challenge, but also combat. Realm Lord Dit was lost in thought. The ingredient of the great sage. Pleasantly surprised, Bufong grabbed the leg of the goat from the ground. As soon as he touched the leg, Bufong sensed an incomparably terrifying aura. The leg seemed to contain an incomparably powerful aura and will. It was the will of the great sage. Even though his leg had been chopped off, the will within the leg had yet to dissipate. Its flesh was sparkling and translucent, and it was brimming with essence, energy. It was definitely not an ordinary ingredient. Bufong grabbed the leg of the goat, feeling very excited. "Bufong, kid, this leg of goat is the ingredient of the great sage. What are you going to do with it? Lord Go turned back into a fat dog. He stuck out his tongue and looked at Bufong warmly. The gazes of the surrounding people also involuntarily shifted over. Realm Master did, and Zou Lords also approached. He was also quite curious about the ingredients of the great sage. The great sage was such an unreachable existence. The one who could become the great sage could be called a supreme existence. He could walk in the starry sky, and he was a true, peerless expert. And now, they saw the ingredient of a peerless expert with their own eyes. "Let's go back to the restaurant first," Bufong said. Then, with a thought, he wrapped the leg of goat, bringing it into the heaven and earth farmland. After putting away the leg of goat, the gazes of the surrounding people stopped. Realm Lord Dit rubbed his hands, smiling at Bufong. "Little friend Bufong, when you're done cooking the leg of goat, you must invite me." The great sage's leg of goat. Just thinking about it makes me drool. Bufong thought for a while, then nodded. As for this leg of goat, how to cook it, it was a problem worth thinking about. Bufong had already come up with many ways to cook the leg of lamb. However, Bufong knew very well that, after all, it was the ingredient of the great sage, and there must be something extraordinary about it. First of all, he had to remove the pressure from the ingredient. Otherwise, it would easily affect the taste of the ingredient. So, Bufong had to think about the specific cooking method. Buzz suddenly, the system's serious voice rang in Bufong's head. "Congratulations to the host for completing the temporary task. Obtain the source of the spring of life in God Vanishing Mountain, and help the seed of the heaven tree recover. Task reward: 1 fragment of the God of Cooking set and the seed of the 9 Revolution Great Path Tea." Bufong froze. Then it dawned on him that he had gone to God Vanishing Mountain to complete this temporary task. Now that the heaven tree had recovered and repelled the nether prison invaders, the task could be considered completed. The task reward was also given out: 1 fragment of the God of Cooking set. Now, Bufong had collected 2 fragments of the God of Cooking set, and the other reward was the seed of the 9 Revolution Great Path Tea. Just the name of this seed alone was enough to tell that it was extraordinary. Bufong was very curious about the next fragment of the God of Cooking set. However, there was still some time before he collected all the fragments, so Bufong didn't think too much about it. As for the 9 Revolution Great Path Tea, Bufong didn't pay much attention to it. He withdrew his consciousness. Bufong raised his eyes and glanced around. The whole 5th floor of Heaven Chief Realm was in a mess. Only the heaven tree stood in the center, emitting thousands of rays of light. It might take a long time for the 5th floor of Heaven Chief Realm to return to its former glory. Perhaps in the coming days, the focus of Heaven Chief Realm would shift to the other layers of Heaven Chief Realm. Just when Bufong and the others were about to leave the 5th floor of Heaven Chief Realm, Bufong suddenly felt a strange fluctuation. It gave Bufong pause. Buzz waves surged in Bufong's spirit sea. His eyes seemed to become misty. He looked at the huge heaven tree in the distance. In the heaven tree, there seemed to be a light shadow watching Bufong from a distance. The light shadow nodded at Bufong. Then, it flew into the heaven tree and disappeared. That should be the spirit of the heaven tree. A rustling sound rang out incessantly. Suddenly, Bufong froze. He didn't know when the branches of the heaven tree had spread to him. A 7-colored seed of the heaven tree was hanging on the branches. "Take it. This is a gift from the heaven tree, because you revived the heaven tree," Realm Lord Dit said in surprise. Bufong paused and didn't say anything. If he hadn't gone to God Vanishing Mountain to get the source of the spring of life, he might not have been able to save the heaven tree. Bufong accepted the gift without any burden. Click! He plucked the 7-colored fruit of the heaven tree from it. A fragrant smell spread out from it. Bufong took a deep breath and felt a strong essence. There was no doubt that the gift from the heaven tree was not an ordinary thing. And Bufong didn't plan to open the gift on the 5th floor. Instead, he planned to open it in the Heaven Chief restaurant. There was nothing else to do after that. Although Realm Lord Dit was weak, he was very excited. City Lord Zou was also incomparably excited. At first, he thought that the Heaven Chief Realm would be completely destroyed. He didn't expect that in the end, it would be saved by the great demon. Now, the way Zhou lords looked at Bufang was completely different. They passed through the entrance of the 5th floor. The group of people went straight to the 3rd floor. The 4th floor of the Heaven Chief realm was suppressed by the 5th floor, completely merging with the 5th floor. From now on, the 5th floor of the Heaven Chief realm could only be changed to the 4th floor. The 3rd floor of the Heaven Chief realm. In an immortal city, all the Heaven Chief were looking at the entrance with anticipation. On the city wall, there were many Heaven Chief. Leading them was City Lord Mingqi. She was wearing a long robe, looking like a fairy. Her beautiful eyes looked straight at the entrance. Suddenly, at the entrance, several figures stepped out from within. Seeing those familiar figures, City Lord Mengqi's eyes instantly burst out with joy. Her tense heart also completely relaxed at this moment. She covered her mouth, feeling as though she was crying tears of joy. Bufang, Realm Lord Dit, Zhou Lords, and Lord Go, they had returned. This meant that the Heaven Chief realm had passed the crisis. The Heaven Chief realm was saved. For a moment, City Lord Mingqi had mixed feelings. In the immortal city. After a long moment of silence, many Heaven Chief cheered excitedly. It was just a real cheer filled with happiness and excitement. The joy of victory made everyone's eyes fill with tears. The Heaven Chief realm was their home. They had once thought that their home would be destroyed. However, after being saved, the happiness of surviving a disaster made them unconsciously cheer. Realm Lord Dit looked at the Heaven Chief realm cheering, his eyes a little dazed. The corners of his mouth also curved into a smile. The sense of accomplishment of being the Realm Lord at this moment made him feel proud. The corners of Bufang's mouth also rose slightly. They didn't stay in the 3rd layer for too long. In this battle, everyone had consumed a lot of energy, and they urgently needed to rest. Bufang's divine perception was completely used up when he used the perishing pot. Realm Lord Dit's will of the Great Path had damaged his body greatly. Moreover, in order to make the Heaven Tree sprout and grow, he had lost more than half of his blood essence. At this moment, he was in a state of deficit. He had forced his cultivation base to break through to the Little Saint realm, and he almost fell back to the half-step Saint realm. The Zhou Lords had gone through a great battle and used up the last drop of immortal energy in his body. His body was already like an arrow at the end of its flight. If Bufang hadn't given him a crystal fruit of life, he would have died a long time ago. They all needed a rest. Of course, Lord Go was in the best state. Walking with elegant cat-like steps, he was thinking about how Bufang would deal with the great sage's goat leg. As he thought about it, he kept drooling. Mengqi didn't stay in the 3rd layer of the Heaven Chief realm for too long. She also needed to rest now. She followed Bufang and the others back to the 1st layer of the Heaven Chief realm. Back in the Heaven Chief restaurant, Creek, she pushed open the door of the restaurant. A strong aroma of food wafted out of the restaurant. The aroma made everyone feel as if they had been in another world. No matter if there was a war outside, the Heaven Chief restaurant was always so warm and tranquil. Ting-a-ling. The curtain of the restaurant was lifted. Cece walked out of the kitchen with a dish in her hands and placed it on the table. He happened to see Bufang and the others pushing the door open, and he grinned happily. "Teacher Boo, you're back." Cece shouted happily. The Black Dragon King and the others also walked out of the restaurant. Yu's face was cold. Beside her was Hua, who had grown into a young girl. When they pushed the door open and saw that Bufang and the others were safe, they couldn't help but sigh in relief. It was good that they were safe. They were afraid that something bad had happened to them. Swoosh! Little Hu, who was lying on Bufang's shoulder, jumped out and landed on the table. He stared at the dish Cece had placed on the table, revealing a greedy look. Then, without saying anything, he began to eat the dish on the porcelain plate. Cece curiously looked at Little Hu. "What a cute Little Hu." Cece sighed, reaching out her small hand to stroke Little Hu's head. The furry feeling made Cece giggle. "She's Little Hu, a new member of our restaurant," Bufang introduced. He rubbed Little Hu's head, then Cece's. Whether it was Little Hu or Cece, they were just kids. Realm Lord Dit and the others couldn't help but smile when they saw this warm scene. They were both physically and mentally exhausted. After finding a place to sit down, they gently exhaled. "You guys wait here. I'm going to the kitchen to cook some dishes to go with the wine. Tonight, we'll cook the great sage's goat leg." Bufong glanced at the others. Realm Lord Dit and the Zou Lords couldn't help but nod. The corners of Bufong's mouth rose. All of a sudden, Realm Lord Dit seemed to remember something. Looking at Bufong, he said, "Bufong, my little friend, hurry up and see what the Heaven Tree's spirit has given you. Open the Heaven Tree's fruit and see." Realm Lord Dit said that. The surrounding people revealed curious looks. Even Lord Go couldn't help but squint his dog eyes, looking interested. Bufong was bewildered. He nodded. His mind flickered, and the immortal tree's fruit, flickering with 7-colored radiance, appeared in his hand. The dragon bone kitchen knife spun, and the knife light fell like a shooting star. Under Bufong's knife light, the 7-colored skin of the fruit of the Heaven Tree slowly fell, revealing the appearance of the Heaven Tree's gift. Chapter 1175. When peeling, the most important thing was the technique. It was like cutting the source stone for gambling. Who knew what would come out of it? Thus, one had to be careful to avoid damaging the thing inside. Of course, Bufong didn't know any techniques for cutting gambling stones, but he had his knife skills. With his divine perception, it was easy for him to cut the fruit. As the 7-colored fruit peeled off, the thing inside was revealed. Bufong was also curious about what the spirit of the Heaven Tree would give to Bufong. The others were also watching curiously. Looking at the gifts that were gradually revealed, everyone's eyes widened. All of a sudden, "It's here." Realm Overlord Dit's eyes brightened. The dragon bone kitchen knife in Bufong's hand paused. "What is it? What gift did the Heaven Tree give?" The people around asked curiously. Bufong's face turned serious. He used his hand to peel off the rest of the fruit. Shortly, the gift was revealed. It didn't look strange at all. It was just a golden egg. That's right. This egg was pure gold, as if it was made of pure gold. Under the light, it sparkled, looking extremely luxurious. If it weren't for the majestic vitality in this egg, Bufong would have thought that the Heaven Tree had given him a decorative piece of art. A golden egg? Not only Bufong, but even Realm Overlord Dit and the others were also very curious. They didn't recognize what kind of egg it was. "It looks like a dragon egg." The Lord Go's eyes suddenly brightened. Staring at the golden egg, he couldn't help but drool. His nose twitched, sniffing the aura emitted from the golden egg. The Lord Go's eyes brightened. "Dragon eggs taste the best," the Lord Go said. "Whether it's a boiled dragon egg or a poached dragon egg, the Lord Go supports you." Bufong glanced at the Lord Go. Did this dog only have eyes for food? If this is really a dragon egg, why not hatch it and raise the dragon? Wouldn't there be an endless supply of dragon meat? Bufong analyzed seriously. His analysis was so clear and logical that the Lord Go was dumbfounded. Recently, Bufong discovered that he seemed to have unlocked a new ability, and his ability to bluff others had become first-rate. Whether it was the two little saint or the Lord Go, they were all dumbfounded. The man and the dog were discussing how to cook the golden egg. As for Realm Lord Dit and the rest, they were speechless. The spirit of the Heaven Tree might have made a very wrong decision. Why did it give the dragon egg to Bufong? Giving the dragon egg to Bufong? Bufong was a chef, and he had a gluttonous dog with him. Would there be a good result if the dragon egg was given to them? However, Realm Lord Dit and the others were so shocked that they sucked in a breath of cold air. This dragon egg wasn't ordinary. It contained a huge amount of energy. It was even more terrifying than the perishing pot that Bufong had used. It seemed to have gathered the terrifying energy of the entire Heaven Chief realm. The Heaven Tree had really given Bufong a big gift. Realm Lord Dit glanced at Bufong. He found that the latter was still seriously discussing with the Lord Go whether to hatch the dragon egg or not. He was speechless. As a dragon egg, shouldn't it be cherished? After a long time, the man and the dog couldn't come to a conclusion. They didn't quarrel. Bufong put the dragon egg into the heaven and earth farmland and let Nyo Hansen incubate it. After that, Bufong clasped his hands, turned around, and walked into the kitchen. He wanted to cook some dishes that went well with wine. He wanted to eat and drink, relaxing. Cece followed him in. It was a wonderful thing to have a chance to learn cooking from Bu Fong. The dishes weren't complicated. In just a moment, an aroma wafted out. It wasn't a strong aroma. Bu Fong walked out with 2 dishes, placing them on the table. A group of people gathered around, sitting around Bu Fong. The dishes were simple. There was a plate of pickled radish and a plate of sliced white demon beef. They all took out blue and white porcelain cups. Bu Fong poured wine for everyone. As the wine was poured into the porcelain cups, it bubbled and sprayed. The rich wine aroma filled the air. Just by smelling it, people felt a wave of pressure disappear, and their bodies relaxed. What a fragrant wine! Everyone was intoxicated, sighing. They all knew that Bu Fong had a collection of good wine. However, it wasn't easy to drink this wine. While eating the dishes, they toasted each other, trying to taste the good wine. After a big battle, they were exhausted. However, after drinking a cup of wine, their exhaustion disappeared. Everyone felt much more relaxed. Bu Fong also held his wine cup, drinking it in one gulp. As the acheron of helplessness entered his stomach, Bu Fong's body became hot, and his pale face became ruddy. Wine had many effects, such as relieving fatigue, relaxing the mind, and so on. These effects were very obvious. However, after drinking the wine, Bu Fong sighed. As his strength increased, his demand for wine became higher and higher. In the past, the acheron of helplessness could satisfy him. However, as his cultivation base rose to the 9-star true immortal realm, he wasn't satisfied with a wine brewed with a leaf of acheron grass and the flower of helplessness. At least, he needed to change the wine to acheron grass, which had a higher number of leaves. Everyone was drinking and chatting. Bu Fong didn't stay for long. He turned around and entered the kitchen, stepping into the heaven and earth farmland. His figure flashed, and he entered the heaven and earth farmland. A gentle breeze blew, and Bu Fong felt somewhat comfortable. He came to the wooden house. Nyo-Han-san was holding the golden dragon egg, looking at it. Obviously, he had never seen a golden dragon egg in his life. It seemed he had sensed Bu Fong's arrival. Nyo-Han-san ran over excitedly, greeting him. "This is a true dragon egg. Find a chance to hatch it," Bu Fong said to Nyo-Han-san. He believed that Nyo-Han-san had the talent to hatch eggs. Nyo-Han-san was stunned. Such a difficult task. He had to find a cow to help him. "I'm not here for the dragon egg. I'm here for the leg of goat that was thrown in earlier." "Where did it go?" Bu Fong asked. "Leg of goat?" So Bu Fong's goal was the leg of goat? That thing seemed to be very important. Nyo-Han-san blinked, then hurried to bring Bu Fong into the wooden house. The leg of goat was casually thrown in a corner of the wooden house. Bu Fong looked at the leg of goat that Nyo-Han-san had casually thrown in the corner, and the corner of his mouth couldn't help but twitch. This leg of goat was the leg of a great sage expert, and it was actually thrown away here. A priceless ingredient was actually used to replenish the inventory. Bu Fong held the leg of goat, not knowing whether to laugh or cry. Of course, this time, besides the leg of goat, he had another purpose in the heaven and earth farmland. That was to plant the seed of the 9-revolution Great Path Tea, the system's reward. The name Heavenly Path Tea sounded extraordinary. Although Bu Fong didn't care too much about it, he still felt that it was better to plant it. It was just right. The heaven and earth farmland had the source of the spring of life, which was the key to planting immortal ingredients. Planting the 9-revolution Great Path Tea here was definitely the best choice. The heaven tree was flourishing in front of the wooden house. Every day, the heaven tree grew bigger. Perhaps it was because it grew in a different location. The heaven tree that grew from a seed of the heaven tree looked a little different from the heaven chief realm. What is the name of the heaven tree? It should have a name, right? Bu Fong looked at the heaven tree, suddenly curious. Curious, Bu Fong asked the system. In his opinion, the system should know. After all, the system was in existence like an encyclopedia. "System, does this heaven tree not have a name?" "Willow tree, pear tree, parasol tree. It should have a name, right?" Bufong asked the system as he held a hoe and dug a hole in front of the heaven tree. The system was silent for a long time, not answering Bufong immediately. After Bufong dug the pit, threw the seeds of the 9-revolution Great Path tea tree into it, and watered it with the spring of life, the system slowly answered him. Heaven Tree, scientific name, Myriad Treasures Heaven Tree, a sacred grade immortal ingredient. It used to be the personal weapon of a supreme expert. The system's solemn voice rang out. Bufong's movements suddenly paused, and his eyes shrank. Myriad Treasures Heaven Tree? The Heaven Tree used to be the weapon of a supreme expert? What the hell? The system ignored Bufong's doubts and only gave Bufong an explanation. That supreme expert who used the Myriad Treasures Heaven Tree as a weapon. Is he dead? Bufong thought for a moment, then asked again. As his strength increased, the system seemed to answer more and more questions. However, this time, the system didn't answer Bufong. The host's current level is not high enough to know the answer to this question. The system sternly rejected Bufong. Even so, Bufong's mind still sank for a long time. Swish, just as Bufong was deep in thought, the soil on the ground split open and a green bud grew out. It grew rapidly, and soon it became a small tree. This small tree was only as tall as a person, and it wouldn't continue to grow. This small tree looked like a tea tree. The leaves of the tea tree had 2 colors, one on the front and the other on the back. This is the 9-revolution Great Path tea tree. Bufong took a deep breath, walking around the tea tree. The tea tree hadn't matured yet, so it wasn't a good time to pick the tea leaves. Bufong wasn't in a hurry, although he was curious and doubtful. However, he still asked Nyo Han-san to take good care of this Great Path tea tree. Of course, he couldn't neglect the egg. If he could hatch a baby dragon from the egg, that would be very interesting. During this process, Jing Yuan appeared in the heaven and earth farmland. She carried a wooden bucket, ready to fetch milk. After all, making ice cream consumed a lot of milk, especially since Goddess City's ice cream business was booming. Basically, every day, Jing Yuan would come to fetch milk. When Jing Yuan saw Bufong, she was very excited. As for Bufong, he had to go back and prepare to cook the goat leg, so he only exchanged a few words with Jing Yuan before bidding farewell and leaving the farmland. After Bufong left, Nyo Han-san began to incubate the egg. To incubate the egg, he had specially built an incubation room. It was specially built for incubating eggs. Bufong returned to the kitchen. In his hand was the goat leg that emitted a mighty pressure and nether energy. According to the Lord Go, this goat leg should be the limb of a great sage of the 9-revolution Nether Chef's clan. That great sage should be an expert of the 9-revolution Nether Chef's clan. However, during the battle, the Lord Go tore off one of his legs. Now, it seemed that the leg would become a dish on a plate. That was the most embarrassing thing. How should he make the goat leg? Bufong thought about it for a long time, but in the end, he chose to restore it to its original taste. The main reason was that the grade of the great sage's ingredient was too high, and Bufong couldn't cook it with other cooking methods. After all, in terms of cooking skills, he wasn't even a second-rank heaven chief. Of course, Bufong's cooking skills must have reached the level of a second-rank heaven chief, but the system didn't recognize it. So, Bufong could only find a chance to take the exam to become a second-rank heaven chief. He placed the goat leg in the kitchen basket. The heavenly alpine spirit spring water poured down. Bufong began to wash the leg. The great sage's ingredient was crystal clear and clean. Even if it wasn't processed, it wouldn't have much of an impact. After washing, he plucked the hair. Although it was the great sage's ingredient, he couldn't eat all the hair, and it wasn't easy to pluck the great sage's leg hair. Bufong took out the black turtle constellation wok and poured half of the spring of life into it. After boiling, the boiling spring of life bubbled. When the bubbles burst, thick steam filled the air. Bufong put the goat meat into the boiling spring of life and began to wash it. The dragon bone kitchen knife spun. After twirling the knife in his hand, Bufong took out the great sage's goat leg, which had been boiling for a while. Grabbing the hoof, Fong held the dragon bone kitchen knife's blade. He scraped it. After being soaked in the spring of life, the great sage's leg hair softened a lot, no longer as sharp as a knife. The moment the dragon bone kitchen knife scraped, a large tuft of hair fell off. While it was hot, Fong's movements were skillful, constantly scraping. The great sage's leg hair fell off. Finally, Fong was stunned. Then he asked Xiaobai to borrow the war god's stick. The slender stick, which was like a soldering iron, pierced through the goat leg, propping it up. Fong used the dragon bone kitchen knife to make a few cuts so that the flavor of the goat leg would soak in during the cooking process. After finishing the preparations, Fong took a step back. Next, it was time for the real cooking. He raised his hand. A white flame hovered in his hand. With a flick of his finger, it covered the great sage's goat leg. The cooking officially began. Chapter 1176. Roast lamb leg. This was a big dish. Moreover, it was a troublesome dish. Roast lamb leg could be used as a banquet dish. During the imperial feast of God Vanishing Mountain, Fong could choose to roast lamb leg. Since it didn't have the ingredients, Fong didn't cook this dish. Today, the Lord Go and the Heaven Tree had worked together to pull the leg of the great sage down. This was the time to test Fong's cooking skills. How to roast lamb leg was a very serious problem. He borrowed the war god's stick from Xiaobai. The hot stick pierced through the lamb leg and propped it up. Of course, he couldn't roast it directly. That way, the lamb leg would only have the pungent smell of lamb. There was no other delicious taste. Fong took out a lot of ingredients. Now, he had planted many spirit materials and spirit herbs in his farmland, and some of the ingredients were also specially cultivated. For example, scale-tail scallion, purple garlic, sun mother ginger, and so on. Of course, there were many other ingredients. These ingredients had been made into common spices by Fong. For this kind of barbecue dish, using spices was the best choice. Because spices could cover up the pungent smell of the ingredients, it could also make the aroma of the meat thicker and spread more easily. Fong broke the purple garlic and cut it into small pieces. He drilled many small holes on the front and back of the lamb leg to put the purple garlic inside. Then, he added some spices and sprinkled the powder, which gave the lamb leg some flavor. It was a pickling process. Fong sprinkled the spices and used his true energy to make the flavor of the spices permeate the lamb leg. More importantly, Fong had a very precise grasp of the speed. He only put in 60% of the spices, and the remaining 40% was used during the roasting process to make the spices fully absorb the flavor. That way, the aroma would overflow. After all the spices were sprinkled, Fong took out the exploding flame pepper. It was a processed exploding flame pepper, so it was very dry. Fong took out the peppers from the exploding flame peppers and stuffed them into the holes. The early stage of preparation was complete. The next step was to roast the leg of lamb. He had borrowed Xiaobai's war god's stick. The war god's stick was a little hot, but the temperature wasn't high. And Fong had used the war god's stick to make a stove. It was just enough to support the leg of lamb. Placing the leg of mutton on the stove, Fong flicked out the white flame, and it darted into the bottom of the stove. Boom! In the blink of an eye, the immortal fire flourished, and a scorching heat instantly burst forth, filling the air in an instant. There were several nozzles at the bottom of the stove. The immortal flame passed through the nozzle, causing the flames to be blazing hot and fast. The flames burned and sprayed on the leg of lamb. The leg of lamb was made from the great sage's meat. However, after being processed by Fong, it had lost the strong defense unique to the great sage's flesh, and the pressure that belonged to the great sage had mostly been removed. The remaining bit of pressure from the great sage could actually enhance the quality of the dish. Scorching flames sprayed everywhere. As a result, the leg of lamb began to change from its original pinkish-white color to a tender pinkish color. Moreover, because of the roasting, the fat of the sheep began to seep out. The oil dripped onto the grill and made a sizzling sound. Roasted leg of lamb was actually a delicacy that required meticulous work. This was because the leg of lamb couldn't be completely cooked in one go. The meat of the leg of lamb was wide and thick. The deeper it was, the harder it was to cook. What Bufang wanted to do was not to give up on the difficult-to-ripen leg meat, but to use his divine perception to sense the ripeness of the meat. With his hands clasped behind his back, Bufang walked around the grill of the lamb. He didn't flip the leg of lamb. Instead, he kept roasting it on one side. The smell of volatile spices permeated the air, which was extremely fragrant. Bufang didn't know much about spices. However, he knew that it was made from many dried spirit herbs and then ground them. It could stimulate people's taste buds and enhance the texture and taste of the ingredients. For roasted dishes, spices were very important, and roasted leg of lamb required a very important spice, which was rosemary. It was different from the rosemary on Earth. Bufang had learned from his system that the rosemary needed here was a top-grade immortal ingredient, made from the dried and ground stem of the rosemary bone flower. The rosemary bone flower was highly poisonous, but its stem was fragrant. If the outer layer of the stem was peeled off, the inner layer would be the source of the flower's fragrance. The rosemary bone flower was a kind of poisonous flower. Its poison didn't come from its fragrance, but its petals. It used its fragrance to attract people and make them touch it. Once touched, the colorless and odorless poison on the petals would infect them and kill them. Even a 9-star true immortal realm expert would be poisoned to death. However, the rosemary bone flower's fragrance was not poisonous. Bufang took out a small white porcelain bottle. He opened the bottle cap. Instantly, a wave of thick aroma spread out from inside. This aroma was extremely fragrant, and there seemed to be a wave of hazy golden light drifting out of the bottle. It was the spice rosemary. It was really fragrant. Even Bufang couldn't help but be immersed in this aroma. However, as a chef, Bufang's divine perception was very strong. Soon, he pulled his mind back. His middle finger and thumb pinched the mouth of the white porcelain bottle, slightly tilting it. His index finger gently tapped it. The rosemary incense contained in the bottle jumped out and fluttered out, sprinkling on the ground. The rosemary was pale gold, which looked very mesmerizing and dazzling. When it sprinkled on the leg of lamb, it seemed to be dyed with a layer of gold. He continued to roast it. The sound of oil splashing became louder. As the surface of the leg of lamb turned golden, a wave of meat aroma began to spread. This meat aroma was very rich. Perhaps because of the quality of the meat, it was so strong that people couldn't stand it. "It smells so good," Bufang exclaimed. Next, the roasting process was more complicated. Thus, Bufang didn't finish it in the kitchen. Instead, he carried the grill and walked out of the kitchen. She lifted the curtain at the entrance of the kitchen, and the bell jingled as it was shaken. Bufang walked out the grill. As he walked out, the aroma of the spice, rosemary, and mutton instantly filled the air. Everyone's attention and line of sight were attracted. The people, who were resting and relaxing on their chairs, couldn't help but straighten their bodies. The moment Little Who smelled the aroma, he couldn't help but turn into a jet of white light, dashing toward the roasted leg of lamb. However, with a flick of Bufang's finger, his head was sent flying to the dining table. He rolled over and sat down on the table in a daze. Bufang placed the roasted leg of lamb on the table. He reached out his hand, gently turning the war god stick. The entire roasted leg of lamb began to rotate slowly. Bufang changed his position. Sizzle, due to the gravity, the golden oil gently slid across the surface of the leg of lamb. Eventually, it splashed. As the oil dripped on the flame, it evaporated instantly, making the meat aroma thicker and thicker. Wisps of smoke rose from the meat. It was unknown when a dagger appeared in Bufang's hand. He used the dagger to poke the mutton from time to time to feel how cooked it was. Cece stood aside, carefully watching Bufang's movements. She could feel the mysteriousness of Bufang's movements. The time he could control the flame and the depth of the dagger when it was inserted was different. The others sat around Bufang. The arrangement of the table in Heaven Chief Restaurant was unique. Everybody stared at the grill on the table, as well as the leg of lamb inside. At this moment, the pink color of the leg of lamb had faded. It was now a pale gold color. That gold color had a thick, meaty aroma. However, it wasn't enough. If it was just like that, the leg of lamb couldn't be eaten. The grilling continued. Gulp, gulp. Because of the volatilization of the spices, people could smell it, feeling a little strange. Realm Lord Dit's eyes widened. He stared at the roasted leg of lamb, taking in a breath of cold air. You use spices, right? Realm Lord Dit looked at Bufong, who was rotating the grill. He couldn't help but ask. Bufong nodded. Rosemary and other spices were essential seasonings for a roasted leg of lamb. Spices are also a major category in our cuisine. However, the Heaven Chief realm has never had a systematic method to make spices. In the beginning, there was a Chilean chef who specialized in spices in Heaven Chief realm. However, since that Chilean chef was killed by the 9 Revolution clan's Nether chef, the recipe of spices in Heaven Chief realm was completely lost. Realm Lord Dit sighed. Looking at the roasted leg of lamb that was glistening with a golden hue, Realm Lord Dit took a deep breath. The fragrance of spices wafted into his nostrils, causing all the pores on his body to open up. I don't know much about spices, Bufong said honestly. Spices were a major category in food. To some chefs, as long as there were spices, no matter how lowly the ingredients were, they could cook the most delicious dishes in the world. Spices were everything to this kind of chef, and the various combinations of spices were very strange to Bufong. After all, Bufong had never studied them systematically. The combination of each spices, the amount of ingredients used, and so on would make a huge difference in the flavor of the combined spices. Thus, chefs who were good at manipulating spices were very rare. As time passed, the roasted leg of lamb turned golden red, which was the color of ripeness. The golden hue had a touch of red. Then, it was almost time to wrap up. After sprinkling all the spices, Bufong took out the improved abyssal chili sauce. Scooping half a spoonful of the abyssal chili sauce into the blue and white porcelain bowl, Bufong added oil to stir the sauce. He prepared the brush, dipped it in the chili sauce, and brushed it on the roasted leg of lamb. Sizzle, the oil splashed, dripping on the flame. Instantly, it evaporated. A wave of spicy aroma spread out. The spicy aroma was mixed with the aroma of lamb. It was very mesmerizing. The people present couldn't stand it anymore, swallowing their saliva. Little Who was restless. However, when he saw Bufong's caring gaze, he curled up into a ball. Lord Go stuck out his tongue, his eyes sparkling. Indeed, it was the right decision to give this leg of lamb to Bufong. The taste of this dish was simply irresistible. Boom! Rumble! Outside the Heaven Chief restaurant. In the sky, layers of black clouds rolled over. This time, the clouds were very thick. In just a blink of an eye, they covered the entire place. In just a moment, the entire first layer of the Heaven Chief world was shrouded in black clouds. Everybody lifted their heads in surprise, looking at the sky. The Heaven Chief was cooking delicious food, and he was about to cross the lightning tribulation. However, this power didn't seem to be ordinary. When Gongshu Ban and the others saw the lightning tribulation, they were a little bewildered. A moment later, they seemed to remember something. Taking in a breath of cold air, they hurried to the Heaven Chief restaurant. Honorable was cooking delicious food again. Adhering to the principle of making mistakes rather than letting go, the group of people flew toward Bufong's store. Boom, 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 boom. Terrifying lightning bolts burst out in the sky. This lightning bolt was extremely frightening. When the lightning dragon materialized, its scales seemed to be reflected very clearly. Since it was about to cross the lightning tribulation, it meant that the dish was almost done. And indeed, Bufong was almost done with this roasted leg of lamb. Of course, Bufong still wanted to make some ingredients. Scale-tail scallions. Bufong took out a lot of chopped scallions, which he washed and placed in a blue and white porcelain bowl. Besides chopped scallions, Bufong also needed to make roasted bait. Bufong took out the fragrant white rice. This rice was made from the rice that Bufong had grown in the heaven and earth farmland. Putting the rice into a bowl, He mashed it into rice paste and ground it into a round cake. Then, he placed it under the oven and roasted it until white bubbles appeared on its surface. One side was slightly yellow, while the other side had white bubbles. Just like that, the roasted bait was made. Bufang took out the roasted bait and placed them in a blue and white porcelain bowl. At the same time, Bufang began to make the sauce. While making the sauce, Bufang rotated the grill, filling the lamb leg with a warm aroma. At this moment, the golden and fragrant roasted leg of lamb was completely done. With a flick of his finger, the white flame flew to Bufang's finger, quietly burning on it. He blew a puff of air. The flame instantly dispersed. The fire was extinguished, and the dish was done. The aroma spread for 10 miles. The fragrant roasted leg of lamb that people had been waiting for was finally done. Chapter 1177. The roasted leg of lamb was finally done. The aroma spread out instantly, and the room's door couldn't stop the fragrance from drifting. The strong aroma filled the air, and steam rolled. The mellow aroma of the meat had an irresistible taste. That aroma completely stimulated people's taste buds and appetites. Outside the door, dark clouds rolled, and thunder rumbled. A wave of majestic pressure fell, shaking everything. Xiaobai was already standing outside the restaurant. He looked up at the sky, facing the lightning. This time, the lightning punishment was very powerful. After all, the oppressive clouds seemed to be pressing down on the city, destroying the city walls. The metal wings behind Xiaobai spread out, and the clanging sounds echoed unceasingly. Lightning radiance shot out from his mechanical eyes. The lightning punishment fell. All of a sudden, Xiaobai soared into the sky. A thunder dragon bearing its fangs and brandishing its claws came out of the dark clouds, as if it wanted to tear the sky apart. The terrifying pressure made people's minds tremble. It was extremely terrifying. Xiaobai wasn't afraid of the lightning. He hovered up, raising his fist. As if he was angry enough to shake the sky, he clashed with the roaring thunder dragon. The lightning scattered, falling on the ground, causing a burst of sparks. The thunder clouds rumbled and rolled. The people around were all dumbfounded. They stood where they were, raising their heads and looking at the sky. Looking at the terrifying collision in the sky, they shuddered. Then they were so excited. 1 lightning punishment, 2 lightning punishments, 3 lightning punishments, 8 lightning punishments fell in a row. Xiaobai's entire body was scorched, and there seemed to be lightning moving on his body. The people around had long held their breaths, not daring to breathe loudly. 8 lightning punishments. What kind of dish did Honorbu cook this time? It could actually trigger 8 lightning punishments. Xiaobai blocked the 8th lightning punishment. His body sank deep into the ground, and the ground cracked under his feet. Smoke billowed, and it was dark. Xiaobai's mechanical eyes suddenly opened. Light burst out, and his aura increased greatly. The dark clouds in the sky seemed to be still brewing. Everyone felt a wave of terror and disbelief. Don't tell me, there's still thunderclouds? What was above the 8 lightning punishments? 9 lightning punishment. That was the legendary lightning punishment. How many years had it been since the Heaven Chief Realm had seen the 9 lightning punishment? Even if it could appear, would the current Heaven Chief Realm be able to withstand the 9 lightning punishment? As expected, the pitch-black clouds rolled and brewed for a while before finally dispersing. The 9th lightning punishment did not descend in the end. After all, the legendary realm was not that easy to break. Bufang was, after all, an immortal chef. As an immortal chef, he was able to trigger 8 lightning punishments, which was already very monstrous. If he were to trigger the 9 lightning punishments, he would incur the jealousy of the heavens. The metal wings on Xiaobai's back retracted. Its performance was over. It strode forward, its body crackling with electric arcs as it stepped back into the restaurant. In the restaurant, when everyone sensed the end of the lightning punishment, they couldn't help but feel excited. Once the lightning punishment ended, it meant that they would be able to taste the delicacy. It was a delicacy cooked with a great sage's ingredient. It was a rare opportunity. As a great sage, how could he become someone else's ingredient that easily? It wasn't easy to get this goat leg of the great sage. Lord Go's mouth watered. The others also craned their necks, looking forward to it. Bufang didn't let them wait for long. He took out a porcelain plate. Then, he distributed the blue and white porcelain plates to everyone sitting at the table. Bufang loved blue and white porcelain plates. He thought that only this kind of plate with this kind of pattern would have a deeper meaning. Everybody took the plate, their eyes fixed on the golden roasted goat leg. A thick aroma wafted out. It wasn't just the aroma of meat, but also the aroma of spices. This aroma was so thick that people couldn't stop eating. Bufang's hand shook, and the dragon bone kitchen knife fell into his hand. His mind flickered, and the dragon bone kitchen knife's appearance changed. It turned into a golden dagger. The golden dagger was sharp, and the handle was engraved with a dragon pattern, which showed its grade. Of course, these were all secondary. The reason why Bufang used the dragon bone kitchen knife to cut the meat was that he was more familiar with it, so he could use it more easily. The next step was to cut the goat leg, which was also a very important process. Playing with the dragon bone kitchen knife that had turned into a dagger, Bufang took out the roasted bait from the blue and white porcelain bowls and gave it to the others. The role of the roasted bait was to be eaten with the roasted goat. After cutting the goat leg and wrapping it with the roasted bait, it was dipped in the sauce and then stuffed into the mouth. Bite down. The aroma of the rice, the lamb, and the sauce burst out at the same time. The three flavors blended, forming an indescribable taste. Of course, it could also be eaten without the roasted bait. Tasting mutton alone was actually a different kind of experience. Of course, this choice depended on the diner. Bufang was more inclined to use the roasted bait and eat it with it. After all, the rice used for the roasted bait was grown in his heaven and earth farmland. Naturally, it was extraordinary, and it contained a powerful will of the great path. Bufang boy, hurry up and give Lord Go a piece of meat. I can't hold it anymore, Lord Go said, placing both of his paws on the table, looking at Bufang. Bufang looked at Lord Go, the corners of his mouth rising. Then the dagger turned, and Bufang grabbed it. The way Bufang held the dagger was different from the normal way. The blade of the dagger was facing him, and he turned his palm upward to hold the dagger. It was close to the fragrant leg of lamb, which was steaming hot and filled the air. The surface of the leg of lamb had been roasted by Bufang until it was golden yellow. Drops of oil dripped from it, splashing on the ground. Bufang carefully sized up the leg of lamb, then tried to find a good spot to cut it. Twirling the war god's stick, Bufang finally found a good spot. Holding the dagger horizontally, he slowly sliced a small piece of mutton with the direction of the blade facing inward. Holding the dagger horizontally, Bufang's eyes scanned it, then he swung it. That piece of lamb emitted a fragrant aroma, falling into Lord Go's porcelain plate. Lord Go's eyes brightened. Without saying anything, he swung his tail at the porcelain plate. That piece of lamb entered his mouth instantly. Woo, 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 woo. Lord Go was intoxicated. The taste of the great sage great ingredient was incomparable. The meat was soft and fragrant, and the spices permeated it, making it extremely delicious. Moreover, it was smeared with a layer of abyssal chili sauce, giving the lamb an abyssal spiciness. This spiciness seemed to be able to corrode one's soul, making one's entire body shiver. In just 2 or 3 bites, the lamb was swallowed. Lord Go's tongue even licked the porcelain plate, which was stained with oil and fragrance. Bufang, boy, Lord Go wants more, Lord Go said, sticking his tongue out. However, Bufang just glanced at him, not saying anything. The dagger continued to cut, and soon, a piece of lamb was cut. That piece of lamb was then handed to you. You squinted, smiling as she received it. She chose to eat the lamb wrapped in roasted bait. She didn't want to waste any of the food Bufang had prepared. Xiaobao was a piece of flatbread made from cooked rice that was mashed into rice paste and then made into a round flatbread. It was placed on the oven to be barbecued. When one side was barbecued and the other side turned yellow, it could be taken out of the oven. This kind of bread was extremely soft and fragrant, completely emitting the fragrance of rice. When the lamb was placed in the bread, the top and bottom of the bread exploded, forming a semicircle. The lamb was in the middle of the bread, and the oil was absorbed by the bread. He used a blue and white porcelain spoon to scoop up the sauce in front of her. This sauce was specially prepared by Bu Fong, so you naturally didn't want to let it go. She scooped up a spoonful of sauce and shook it on the bread. It seeped in through the gap, mixing with the lamb. It looked extremely appetizing. The people around swallowed their saliva, staring at you and the piece of bread in Yu's hand. Bu Fong raised his head, glancing at you. The corners of his mouth rose. This way of eating was correct and interesting. The knife in Bu Fong's hand flashed. His movements were gentle and slow. He wanted to maintain the integrity of the whole piece of lamb. The surface of the lamb was the most delicious and tasty. After cutting the surface of the lamb and distributing it to the people, Bu Fong continued to roast the lamb using the remaining heat of the oven, so that the cut part of the lamb could continue to taste. As for the others, they began to taste the food. You held the roasted bait. Her red lips parted slightly, opening her mouth to take a bite. Crunch! The surface of the roasted bait was crispy, and the inside was soft and moist. When his teeth collided with the flatbread, he felt a warmth that stirred his mind. When they continued to bite, it was the hot lamb. The unique flavor of lamb filled the air. Although it was rich, it wasn't appetizing. With the delicious sauce, it seemed to sublimate the taste. It was as if the taste had been sublimated. Eating it made one's entire body tremble. Bu Fong looked at the people happily eating the roasted lamb, and he couldn't help but be in a trance. This delicacy reminded him of a famous snack from his previous life, rujiamo. If he had time, Bu Fong could make a rujiamo. Moreover, there were so many gourmet arrays, so Bu Fong could continue to play with the death food tool. This rujiamo could be included in the death food tool. Bu Fong cut a piece of lamb, opened his mouth, and used the dagger to pour the lamb into his mouth. The lamb slid across the dagger, and Bu Fong's tongue rolled it up, putting it into his mouth. Bu Fong bit it. The texture of the meat was just right. The flavor of the spices, the aroma of the purple garlic, and the enchanting taste of the rosemary burst out in his mouth, making Bu Fong feel intoxicated. Together with the delicious abyssal chili sauce, this lamb seemed to have magic. It was indeed worthy of being the ingredient of the great sage. The taste was indeed different. If he used other lamb legs, although the taste wouldn't be bad, it would always lack a kind of meaning. The great sage's ingredient contained majestic essence, energy, and life energy. As they ate, they breathed essence energy from their mouths. This essence energy was thick and didn't dissipate, wrapping around their mouths. It seemed to be constantly nourishing their bodies. The people, who were tired from the battle, felt that their bodies had reached their peak at this moment. Roasted lamb, good wine, the aroma of wine and meat filled the air. It floated out of the restaurant's door. Instantly, the entire immortal city was shrouded in the aroma. After a long time, the whole roasted leg of lamb was eaten as it was roasted, and it was eaten cleanly. Bu Fong was also very diligent in cutting the leg bone, trying his best to keep it as clean as possible. Every strand of mutton on the leg bone was cut clean, leaving the bone spotlessly white and flawless. After a delicious meal, everyone lay comfortably on their chairs, essence energy filling their nostrils and mouths. The great sage's roasted lamb leg was enough for them to savor for several days. After eating and drinking to their heart's content, they left lazily. The crisis of the Heaven Chief realm was over, and they felt much more relaxed. The will of the great path had returned, and the Heaven Tree was revived. In a short period of time, the immortal cooking realm had shown a scene of vitality. Of course, when Realm Overlord Dit was humming a tune and about to leave the Heaven Chief restaurant, he seemed to think of something. He turned his head and said to Bu Fong, who was cleaning the lamb leg, "Bu Fong, my little friend, your cooking skills have long surpassed the immortal chef level. It's time for you to take the higher level Heaven Chief test." That way, you can get more resources and have a deeper understanding of cooking, Realm Overlord Dit said. Bufong grabbed the lamb leg, looking at Realm Overlord Dit in surprise. Bufong knew clearly that his cooking skills had long surpassed the immortal chef level. He had to take the test. Whether it was for honor or to get more resources, Bufong shouldn't give up the test. I will go. Bufong nodded. Realm Overlord Dit heard Bufong's reply. Instantly, he grinned, flipping his blonde hair. I'll host your test myself. Then, Realm Overlord Dit strode away. Bufong pouted his lips. After the others had left, he closed the restaurant's door. The entire restaurant was filled with the aroma of the lamb. Bufong took a deep breath, stretching his body. After Lord Dog had eaten his fill, he had already laid down at the side and was snoring away. Hua stayed by Lord Go's side. Looking at this warm scene, Bufong felt a little relaxed. After packing his things, Bufong went upstairs. Yu clasped her hands, her long dress fluttering as she followed him. Shortly, the two of them reached the room on the second floor. They opened the door to each other and entered their respective rooms. Through the crack in the door, Nethery saw Bufong close the door, so she gently closed it. Chapter 1178. Swoosh. In the bathroom, the dense steam rolled slowly under the light. The dim yellow light sprinkled down, and the water splashed. Bufong walked out of the bathroom, feeling refreshed. He was wearing a bathrobe, which was wrapped around his body, revealing a bit of his white chest. His wet hair, under the wiping of the cloth, gradually dispersed the water splashes. Bufong stretched out his hand, spread his fingers, and ran through his hair. There was a bit of coldness at the tip of his hair. Bufong's face showed some satisfaction. He gently exhaled, took a step forward, and sat on the soft bed. It had been a long time since he had such a comfortable rest. Bufong also had some nostalgia. After sitting on the bed for a while, Bufong got up and went to the window. The window was wide open, and a breeze blew in from outside, blowing on Bufong's face, making him feel a little comfortable and relaxed. Leaning against the window, Bufong propped himself up with one hand, stroking his chin. His eyes followed the window and looked out. The brightly lit immortal city was very lively. Even at night, it still looked like a city that never sleeps. The crisis of the Heaven Chief Realm had passed, and the whole Heaven Chief Realm was filled with celebration. The city lord of the first layer of the Heaven Chief Realm, Gongshu Baiguang, made the whole city celebrate. Many Heaven Chief Realms held a banquet and held a cooking ceremony. The whole city was filled with a rich aroma. For the people of the Heaven Chief Realm, besides celebrating with food, what else could they use to celebrate? Feeling the night, wind blowing, smelling the aroma of the dishes in the air. Bufong's state of mind was also slightly calmer. After a long time, Bufong closed the window. Returning to the bed, lying on the bed, he covered himself with a quilt. The soft quilt was comfortable and comfortable. Bufong closed his eyes, and after a while, he started snoring. His mind relaxed. Bufong couldn't help but fall asleep. The night passed without a word. The next day, the sunlight shone through the window and shone on Bufong's face, making him squint his eyes slightly. Messy hair spread on the bed. Bufong straightened up, stretched, yawned, and rubbed his sleepy eyes. He got up and went to the bathroom to wash up before walking out of the room. He went to the kitchen. In the kitchen, there were already sounds of people bustling about. Bufong was slightly stunned. He looked over and saw Cece, who was wearing a chef robe, practicing her knife skills and cooking delicious food. As if she had seen Bufong, Cece raised her head and revealed a sweet smile. "Teacher Boo, you're awake." Cece smiled and said. Bufong nodded, glanced at Cece, and touched her head. Then he walked to his stove, took out a kitchen knife, and began to practice his knife skills. When Cece saw that Bufong was so hard-working, she felt a burst of excitement in her heart. When people who were better than you worked harder than you, what reason do you have to continue to be a salted fish? Hence, Cece also followed Bufong's rhythm and began to practice her cooking skills. Heaven Chief Realm, 5th floor. The 5th floor of Heaven Chief Realm was a mess. Only a heaven tree stood proudly, its huge canopy covering the sky. A fresh and clean wind blew over. It rolled up the yellow sand of the 5th floor. Sand and stones rolled, fluttering in the wind. Realm Lord Dit, Yaya, City Lord Ming-Chi, Zo Lords, the 4 of them landed on the ground of the 5th floor that had been turned into ruins. There was only yellow sand left in the 5th floor. However, with the heaven tree, it shouldn't be a problem to turn it into Greenland again. The heaven tree had brought new hope and a new future to the Heaven Chief realm. From today onwards, all cooking competitions in the Heaven Chief realm will be changed to chef's challenges. Also, individual chef challenges are encouraged. We've been living in peace for too long, and we've lost our edge. Sooner or later, we will suffer a disaster. Realm Lord Dit clasped his hands. The wind blew, making his yellow hair flutter. City Lord Ming-Chi and the others nodded. Although the Bronze Gate is sealed by the Heaven Tree's branches, it won't last long. We must become stronger. Only then can we protect our home. Realm Lord Dit said in a low voice. Only after experiencing despair could one understand how precious a peaceful home was. All right, the restoration and repair of the 5th floor won't be done overnight. Take your time. There's no need to rush. Realm Lord Dit said. After that, they left the 5th layer of the immortal cooking realm. The 4th and 5th floors merged into one. Now, the 4th floor of the Heaven Chief realm was no longer there. From the 5th floor, they directly went to the 3rd floor of the Heaven Chief realm. Ming-Chi was now the city lord of the 3rd floor of the Heaven Chief realm. Zhou Jiluan was the city lord of the 2nd floor of the Heaven Chief realm. As for the 5th floor of Heaven Chief realm, Yaya was the city lord. As for the 1st floor of the Heaven Chief realm, Gongshu Baiguang was still the city lord. However, with the resurrection of the Heaven Tree, everyone could feel that the Heaven Chief realm was different. The immortal energy slowly became denser, and cultivation seemed to become easier. Perhaps as time passed, more powerful geniuses would be born in the Heaven Chief realm. Days passed slowly. Almost a month had passed. These days, Bufang was not in a hurry to take the test. After being busy for such a long time, he also needed to rest. The Heaven Chief restaurant was crowded every day. As the great demon, who was famous in the Heaven Chief realm, many people would travel thousands of miles to come here, just to taste Bufang's dishes. As for Bufang, after cooking the required dishes every day, he would leisurely pull a chair and sit at the entrance of the restaurant, basking in the sun and taking a nap. At night, Bufang would go to the kitchen to study new dishes. Of course, he would occasionally go to the Heaven and Earth farmland to study new death food tools and so on. For example, he had thought of the Rujiamo and the Gourmet Array, and so on. Of course, these still needed to be studied. A month's time was not long, but it was not short either. After resting for so long, Bufang's mental state had recovered to its peak. His cooking skills had reached their peak. Heaven and Earth farmland, the wind was blowing. The sound of grass rustling reverberated. Bufang went there, taking a deep breath of fresh air that could cleanse his heart and lungs. Then, he came to the wooden house. In front of the wooden house, the many treasures Heaven Tree and the 9 Revolution Great Path Tea Tree were growing luxuriantly. The treasure-snatching Heaven Tree seemed to have green fruits. After growing for a while, they would bear fruit. And the 9 Revolution Great Path Tea Tree was growing luxuriantly. The will of the Great Path flowed on it, spreading an aura that made people feel refreshed. Bufang reached out his hand, plucking a tea leaf. This tea leaf had 2 colors. The front was green, and the back was light blue. The edge of the tea leaf was jagged. Bufang held the tea leaf with both hands, carefully studying it. The tea leaf emitted a faint fragrance. Putting the tea leaf into his mouth, he gently bit it. A bitter taste with a little sweetness spread in his mouth. As the tea entered his mouth, Bufang felt like his mental energy was boiling like a pot of boiling water. His eyes suddenly brightened. Bufang also felt that this tea leaf was extraordinary. He planned to make tea with these tea leaves. Of course, he couldn't use these raw tea leaves to make tea. The 9 Revolution Great Path Tea Tree was definitely extraordinary. Bufong took out a blue and white porcelain bowl, which was shaped like an arc carefully. He plucked the tea leaves from the 9 Revolution Great Path tea tree. Then, he put it into the bowl. After filling it to the brim, Bufong gave up on plucking. Putting away the bowl, Bufong planned to return to the Heaven Chief restaurant to process the tea leaves. Think about it. Sitting in front of the restaurant, watching the flowers bloom and wither, waiting for the clouds to gather and disperse. Then, holding a cup of hot tea with its fragrance, he would take a sip. That feeling was really wonderful. Jing Yuan and Johan San came from afar, talking and laughing. Jing Yuan held a bucket in her hand, which was filled with milky milk. The fragrance of the milk filled the air. When Bufong saw Jing Yuan, he asked her about the Fong Fong ice cream shop. Then he asked Jing Yuan to leave. As time passed, the sales of the Fong Fong ice cream shop began to decline. It was mainly because the novelty had passed and the women in Goddess City weren't so enthusiastic about spending. However, although it had declined, the daily sales were still at a considerable level. Bufong was very satisfied. At least, compared to the Heaven Chief restaurant, the Fong Fong ice cream shop sales were much better. The competition in Goddess City wasn't big, unlike the Heaven Chief world. Even though Bufong had the title of the Great Demon, many diners would choose other restaurants. Since there were too many choices, the turnover was much lower than that of the Fong Fong ice cream shop. After sending off Jing Yuan, Bufong asked Johan San about the death food tool. Currently, the death food tool was mainly studied by Johan San. This bowl could add the will of the great path of the heaven and earth farmland into the ingredients, which was the key to making the death food tool. Then, Bufong gave the gourmet array to Johan San. Today, Johan San wore his self-made crystal glasses every day, studying the death food tool. His latest goal was to become infatuated with the imprisonment formation. He felt that this array wasn't useless. It was actually very useful. However, he hadn't found a suitable array carrier yet. In other words, he needed food that could support this array. Johan San and Bufong had tried many delicacies, such as ramen, soup dumplings, and so on. However, none of them worked. Although the confinement array didn't look very violent, it had very strict requirements for the food carrier. Ordinary food simply couldn't withstand the power of the array and would directly explode. Perhaps it didn't explode, but it couldn't display the power of the array. Both of them knew that this was a long process. Bufong and Johan San discussed for a long time. Then, Bufong said goodbye to Johan San and left the heaven and earth farmland. Bufong returned to the restaurant. He stretched his body. Then, he stepped into the kitchen. Bufong clasped his hands, deep in thought. 1 month ago, Realm Lord Dit told him that he should go and test his cooking skills. Previously, there were many things to be done in the Heaven Chief realm, and Bufong was too lazy to go. Now that 1 month had passed, Bufong felt that it was about time for him to take the test. Of course, before that, Bufong still planned to process the tea leaves he brought out of the heaven and earth farmland. He concluded that the 9 Revolution Great Path tea leaves would give him a different surprise. Making tea was a complicated and tedious process, and it required a lot of effort. In fact, tea leaves could also be used as ingredients. Many delicacies used tea leaves as supplementary ingredients. For example, tea eggs, steamed braised pork with tea, longjing shrimp, and so on. These delicacies were all related to tea. Thus, making a good tea was actually very important to Bufong. His mind flickered, and he took out the blue and white porcelain bowl. After filling the bowl with tea leaves, Bufong poured them out, spreading them on the table. There was only one 9 Revolution Great Path tea tree, so it naturally didn't produce many tea leaves. Although Bufong filled the bowl, there were only 81 tea leaves, which was exactly the number of 9 by 9. However, although there were only 81 tea leaves, the spirit energy and energy of the tea leaves were incomparably strong. He took out the black turtle constellation wok. Heating the wok. There was no oil in the wok. He just preheated it. After the wok was preheated, Bufong threw the 81 tea leaves into the wok. Covering his hand with a layer of true energy, Bufong used his hand to rub the tea leaves in the wok. As he rubbed them, the surging tea aroma filled the air. The tea aroma filled the air. As the tea aroma spread, there seemed to be a mysterious fluctuation spreading. In the tea aroma, there seemed to be chanting and scriptures floating in the air. Without a doubt, this tea was extraordinary. Chapter 1179. Making tea was a complicated and tedious process. Bufong wasn't very familiar with making tea, but he had his own way of making tea. He put the tea leaves into the black turtle constellation wok. He didn't add oil in the wok to dry the tea leaves. As soon as the tea leaves entered the wok, the water in the tea leaves began to evaporate. Bufong rubbed the tea leaves with his palms, causing the tea aroma to diffuse and become moist. The thick tea aroma contained a refreshing taste, which seemed to be able to clear people's minds. After stir-frying for a while, Bufong scooped out the tea leaves that had been stir-fried into thin strips. A white flame rose from his palms, slowly burning. These tea leaves floated above the flame. Under the scorching heat, the water in them evaporated. Finally, he took out a small round porcelain bowl, placing the dried tea leaves into the bowl one by one. He closed the lid. The appearance of these tea leaves was excellent, and Bufong did not need to do any processing. Each tea leaf had two colors. One was dark green, and the other was light blue. Bufong put away the porcelain bowl and took out a tea leaf. After stir-frying and drying, this tea leaf had shrunk into a small strip. It was crystal clear like colored glass, incomparably beautiful. Bufong took out a special tea-making cup, placing the tea leaves into it. Then, he poured the boiled life water into it. Swish! As the dense steam entered the bowl, the tea leaves swirled inside. As soon as the life spring was poured in, the clear water turned dark green. Bufong closed the lid. Letting the tea brew for a few minutes, he opened the lid. His nose touched the lid, smelling the tea aroma. A faint, dreamlike aroma arose, tickling Bufong's taste buds. Bufong was quite amazed. This 9-revolution great path tea didn't need to pour out the water from the first brew to brew it a second time. The tea he brewed for the first time was already excellent. The thick tea aroma diffused, with some tea foam on the surface. The tea leaves spun and spun in circles. Bufong held the teacup in one hand and the lid of the teacup in the other. He gently blew on it, causing the rising steam to be blown away. He gently rubbed the lid of the teacup a few times. Blow a puff of air and shake your head from side to side. The refreshing fragrance of the tea wafted into his nose. Sizzle. He took a sip of tea. The boiling hot tea flowed down his lips and into his mouth. The fragrance of the tea instantly exploded in his mouth and filled the air, making Bufong feel an indescribable satisfaction. Bufong closed his eyes, feeling the aroma of the tea swirling in his mouth and assaulting his nose. He gulped down the tea in his mouth. The boiling hot tea flowed down his throat and quickly entered his stomach. Suddenly, the tea seemed to explode, causing sparkles to spread in Bufong's abdomen. An invisible wave of fluctuation instantly spread throughout Bufong's body, making him feel incomparably relaxed. At this moment, the mental energy in his spirit sea surged, as though it had received a boost. This 9-revolution great path tea actually worked on mental force. Bufong narrowed his eyes. Bufong smacked his lips and took another sip of tea. This tea was not like wine. Wine was mellow, but tea was the kind of fragrance that needed to be carefully tasted. After taking another sip, Bufong could feel that his mental force seemed to have become more abundant. If his guess was right, this 9-revolution great path tea should have the effect of helping to restore mental force. This effect made Bufong's eyes light up. Now, after using the perishing pot, Bufong could take another sip of the 9-revolution great path tea and stand up to use the perishing pot again. Bufong was very happy. Holding the tea, he savored it as he walked out of the kitchen. He lifted the curtain of the kitchen, and immediately a tinkling sound rang out. As soon as he came out, The tables around the kitchen door were already full of diners. When they saw Bu Fong, they all greeted him. Bu Fong nodded at them, signaling them to eat and drink. Then, with one hand clasped behind his back and the other holding a cup of tea, he walked out. He walked to the front of the restaurant, pulled a chair over, and sat down, drinking tea and taking a nap. The restaurant's business continued. Today, Bu Fong let Cece be in charge of the business. This little girl's cooking skills had improved too fast. Perhaps it was because she was too talented. Today, Cece was no weaker than an ordinary immortal chef. This time, Bu Fong planned to take Cece to the cooking test after she finished today's business. Taking advantage of this time, Bu Fong took a rest. Soon, today's business hours were over. It was unknown when Cece had come to Bu Fong's side, but Bu Fong was still holding the empty teacup, staring blankly. "It's over." Coming to his senses, Bu Fong looked at Cece, saying. Cece couldn't help but nod. Bu Fong stood up, putting away the teacup, and stretched his body. His spirit, energy, and spirit seemed to be awakened at this moment. He rubbed Cece's head. Under Cece's expectant eyes, Bu Fong grinned, saying, "Let's go. We're going to take the cooking test." After Bu Fong said that, Cece excitedly clenched her fists. Becoming a heaven chief had always been Cece's first dream. Cece's second dream was to become a great heaven chief like Teacher Bu. He closed the door of the restaurant. Bu Fong held Cece's little hand, walking out of the restaurant. Walking on the long street of the heaven chief world, two shadows, one big and one small, were stretched out. The familiar street was still so lively. Everyone knew Bu Fong, so they greeted Bu Fong. Bu Fong raised the corner of his mouth, nodding to them to return the greeting. The chef test had to be done in the Heaven Chief Hall. When Bu Fong went to the Heaven Chief Hall for the first time, he caused a big commotion. Today, Bu Fong went to the Heaven Chief Hall again to take a higher-level chef test. During this time, too many things had happened in the Heaven Chief world. Cece was curious about everything. This was the first time she came to the Heaven Chief Hall, so she hid behind Bu Fong. Of course, the people in the Heaven Chief Hall knew Bu Fong. Although Mu Luer didn't help in the Heaven Chief Hall, the big commotion Bu Fong had made everyone in the Heaven Chief world remember Bu Fong. As soon as Bu Fong stepped into the Heaven Chief Hall, many people from the Heaven Chief Hall came to greet him. Many people from the Immortal Kitchen Pavilion came over and respectfully bowed to Bu Fong. With Bu Fong's cooking skills, he deserved their respect. Whether it was the title of the Heaven Chief Competition Champion or his action of saving the Heaven Chief world from a crisis, he deserved their respect. "This is my apprentice chef. It's her first time to take the first-class Heaven Chief test. Take her with you." Bu Fong glanced at an expert in the Heaven Chief Hall. The expert in the Heaven Chief Hall nodded respectfully. "Cece, don't be nervous. Stay calm. With your cooking skills, becoming an immortal chef is just a piece of cake." Bu Fong rubbed Cece's head and said. The experts in the Heaven Chief Hall were speechless. As expected of the great demon, he was really domineering. Cece was only 7 or 8 years old at most. Such a young child. Coming here to take the test was just a formality. How could it be easy to become an immortal chef? The record of the Heaven Chief world. The youngest person to become an immortal chef was a 10-year-old genius. Cece looked only 7 or 8 years old. Did she want to break the record? Even if she wanted to break the record, it was not as simple as taking something out of her pocket. After all, she was just a child. Little Hu lay on Bu Fong's shoulder, curled up and sleeping soundly. Cece seemed a little simple. Bu Fong picked up Little Hu and put him in Cece's arms. "Let Little Hu accompany you. You won't be nervous this way. Go, let's take the test together. When we go back, I will cook a big meal for you." Bu Fong rubbed Cece's head and said with a smile. Cece nodded and felt much more relaxed. Rubbing Little Hu's head, she followed the expert in the Heaven Chief Hall and left. The Heaven Tree had recovered, and the Heaven Chief world had been restored. Today, the Heaven Chief Hall had become more and more lively. Perhaps because of the recovery of the will of the Great Path, more and more people came to take the Heaven Chief test. Moreover, they were getting younger and younger. The golden age of the Heaven Chief world seemed to be coming. Bu Fong glanced around and saw many children who were a little older than Cece standing together, waiting for the test. The expert in the Heaven Chief world was respectfully leading the way. He was even a little reserved. After all, he was facing the great demon of the Heaven Chief world. Owner Boo, what level do you want to test in the Heaven Chief today? The second grade Heaven Chief world? The expert in the Heaven Chief hall asked. He put his hands behind his back and walked at a steady pace. You can say that. Let's take the second grade Heaven Chief world first. Bu Fong said. The expert in the Heaven Chief hall was speechless. The record of when Bu Fong became an immortal chef was still there. It had only been half a year since Bu Fong became an immortal chef. Now, Bu Fong was going to take the second grade Heaven Chief world. He was indeed worthy of being the great demon. Okay, follow me. The Pavilion Master, the Deacon, the City Lord, and the Realm Lord are all waiting for you. The expert in the Heaven Chief hall didn't say anything else, just leading the way. After a while, he brought Bu Fong into a splendidly decorated room. Squeak. The door of the room was opened. Bu Fong stepped in. Instantly, everyone's eyes in the room shot over, falling on Bu Fong's body. In the next moment, gasps resounded in the surroundings. So familiar. That guy. Looks like the Great Demon. The Great Demon also came to take the second grade Heaven Chief world. This is going to be interesting. Nowadays, there are so many monstrous geniuses coming to take the second grade Heaven Chief world. Rustling noises resounded in the room. Many people were whispering to each other. Their gazes fell on Bu Fong, and all sorts of feelings welled up in their hearts. There were complicated feelings, admiration, respect, and provocation. After the renovation of the Heaven Chief world, there was only one Heaven Chief hall, which was the Heaven Chief hall on the first layer. All the monstrous geniuses in the Heaven Chief world would take the test in the Heaven Chief hall on the first layer. The Heaven Chief hall on the other layers had been canceled. So, today the first layer of the Heaven Chief world had gathered many geniuses. Geniuses were all arrogant. He knew the fame of Bu Fong, the Great Demon, and he also knew that Bu Fong was the champion of the Heaven Chief world competition. But so what? Bu Fong still wanted to take the second grade Heaven Chief world test. If they could suppress the Great Demon in the test, then their fame might spread throughout the entire Heaven Chief world. This was what made these geniuses excited. Bu Fong put his hands in his pockets, ignoring these gazes that contained many emotions. His gaze swept across. It landed in the distance. There, the Realm Lord of Dit leaned lazily on the chair. Gongshu Baiguang sat respectfully next to the Realm Lord. As for Mingqi, she wore an immortal robe and looked like an immortal. She was now the Pavilion Master of the Heaven Chief Hall, and her status was respected. Not only was she the City Lord of the third layer, but she was also the Pavilion Master of the Heaven Chief Hall. Many admiring gazes were cast on her. Mingqi had a faint smile on her face. She seemed to feel Bu Fong's gaze. Mingqi gently nodded at Bu Fong. The Heaven Chief world has gone through a tribulation. Now that it has passed the tribulation, it will definitely show its brilliance. The Heaven Tree will recover. The immortal Qi will return. The geniuses will awaken, and the evildoers will fight for glory. You are the future of the Heaven Chief world, the hope of the Heaven Chief world. This test will determine your future. Gongshu Baiguang, as the City Lord, was in charge of this test. Nowadays, the Heaven Chief World Test was only held at a fixed time, once a month. It was very serious. The contestants who participated in the test couldn't help but feel nervous. This time, there are 10 people participating in the second grade Heaven Chief test. The test will set a question, and everyone will cook within the prescribed range. The dishes you cook will be evaluated by the heavenly will of the Heaven Chief world. The result of the evaluation will determine the result of your test. It will be fair and open. Gongshu Baiguang said. Now the test begins. The Realm Lord will announce the topic of this second grade Heaven Chief test. As his voice fell, everyone's eyes fell on the lazy Realm Lord Dit. Realm Lord Dit flicked his golden hair, his handsome face revealing a smile that could make young girls yearn for love. He glanced at the audience and said, Finally, the second grade Heaven Chief test. I'm looking forward to it. Realm Lord Dit said. Then, he gave Bu Fong a deep look. A moment later, the corners of his mouth rose. His eyes were full of playfulness. As for the topic of this second-grade Heaven Chief test, this Realm Lord has already thought about it a month ago. This time, the topic is, well, dried pot. Realm Lord Dit's words fell. The audience was stunned, then burst into an uproar. Mengqi was speechless, rolling her eyes. The corner of Bu Fang's mouth twitched, speechlessly looking at the complacent Realm Lord Dit. This guy, is he going to cause trouble? Chapter 1180. The proposition was dried pot. Realm Lord Dit was really naughty. The corner of Bu Fang's mouth twitched. He glanced speechlessly at the delighted Realm Lord Dit in the distance. Is this guy stupid? What's the point of being mischievous? If he made a perishing pot, the entire first level of the Heaven Chief realm would be destroyed. Then, what kind of test would he need? However, Bu Fang should also understand Realm Lord Dit's intention. This guy just wanted to be naughty and seek excitement. After all, the power of the perishing pot was so terrifying, but he had never tasted it. This was the point. Realm Lord Ditai was probably curious and wanted to have a taste of the perishing pot. Of course, Realm Lord Dit also understood that Bu Fang would remove the destructive power of the perishing pot and leave only the delicious perishing pot. Therefore, Realm Lord Dit's confidence made Bu Fang feel a little conflicted. Mengqi rolled her eyes. Without a doubt, she also understood the Realm Lord's naughty thoughts. Bu Fang's perishing pot was a terrifying weapon that could even kill the little saint. This guy actually wanted Bu Fang to cook a perishing pot. If Bu Fang hadn't removed the destructive power, it would have exploded with just one bite. Let's see how the Realm Lord will deal with this. The others around were also excited. Of course, they didn't know about Bu Fang's ultimate weapon, the perishing pot. They were simply excited because of this proposition. In fact, Bu Fang didn't know many people in this test. For example, Gongshu Ban and the others weren't here. His opponents in the Heaven Chief realm didn't have a breakthrough either. On the contrary, many Heaven Chief realm lords that Bu Fang didn't know were preparing to break through. Therefore, there were many people in the audience that Bu Fang was familiar with. Xinyuan Xiaohui, Gongshu Ban, and the others were all sitting there. The proposition is perishing pot. Perishing pot. What a strange proposition. As expected of the second-grade Heaven Chief Realm Lord's test. It's already such a difficult proposition. I've never cooked a perishing pot before. What if I fail? The contestants were a little flustered, mainly because Realm Lord didn't follow the rules and asked them to cook a perishing pot. Although dried pot was a major category of delicacies, and there were similar delicacies in the immortal cooking realm, very few people actually cooked dried pot. They didn't know much about this dish. Now that it had suddenly become the topic of the examination, they could only say one thing. How crafty. Lord of Bu Fang of Bu Bu of the test. Bu Fang, on the other hand, was somewhat speechless and bored. Bu Fang was too familiar. Bu Fang. Bu. The original form of the perishing pot was a dried pot cabbage with a gourmet array. As for the cabbages, he chose the Fireheart cabbage, which contained the will of the great path, which he had grown in his farmland. It was a very high-grade ingredient, so it was naturally extraordinary. Actually, the craftsmanship was not difficult. The main difficulty of this dish was how to carve the gourmet array in it. Glancing at Realm Lord Dit, Bu Fang's lips suddenly curled up. Didn't this guy want to eat dried pot? Then let him have his fill. The gourmet array didn't just have explode. All right, the topic has been decided. Now, everyone, please return to your seats. You have the time it takes to brew half a cup of tea to think about the dish you're going to cook. The time limit for this dish is 1 incense stick. If you fail to cook it after that time, you'll be disqualified. Gongshu Baiguang said seriously. All the contestants were boiling with excitement. Gongshu Ban sat in the audience stand, excitedly clenching his fists. I didn't expect that the topic this time would be dried pot. Realm Lord His Excellency is so bold. Gongshu Ban said excitedly. Xinyuan Xiaohui, Xinyuan Xian, and the others all looked at him in confusion. Gongshu Ban saw the confusion in their eyes, and he became even more excited. To satisfy their thirst for knowledge, Gong Shu Ban planned to teach them about Owner Bu's killing move, the perishing pot, the death food tool. After that, Gong Shu Ban vividly described the scene of Bu Fong throwing a perishing pot in the fifth layer of the immortal cooking realm, blowing up the mighty existence behind the bronze gate into a bloody mess. The extremely terrifying perishing pot had the power to destroy the world, and Gong Shu Ban described it as the #1 killing weapon in the entire world. This caused Xianyuan Xiaohui and the others to be stunned. Then, they all got a hold of themselves. They sucked in a breath of cold air. So, Realm Lord His Excellency wants to taste Owner Bu's perishing pot? How much courage does he have? Xianyuan Xian covered her red lips, saying in disbelief. That's why I, Gong Shu Ban, admire Realm Lord His Excellency's courage like a surging river. Realm Lord His Excellency is definitely an existence that stands at the top of the food chain. For delicious food, he dares to face everything. Gong Shu Ban exclaimed. Xianyuan Xiaohui rubbed her chin. Owner Bu wouldn't cook that kind of explosive perishing pot. After all, it's a killing weapon. Owner Bu wouldn't use it on Realm Lord His Excellency. Gong Shu Ban and the others nodded, thinking that what Xianyuan Xiaohui said made sense. It was true that Bu Fong wouldn't cook a perishing pot. He just needed to cook a perishing pot under normal circumstances and not carve the gourmet array into it. However, seeing Realm Lord Dit shaking his head, Bu Fong felt that he had to teach Realm Lord Dit some principles of how to conduct himself. Now the test begins. He didn't pay attention to the chattering crowd. Gong Shu Baiguang announced the start of the test. As soon as he finished speaking, the atmosphere in the room instantly changed. Everyone tensed up. With a flicker of their minds, they summoned their stoves and smashed them on the ground. Rumbling sounds resounded unceasingly. These young people were suppressing their anger. They wanted to become famous in one fell swoop. As long as they could suppress the great demon in this test, when the news spread out, their fame would spread throughout the entire Heaven Chief realm. Therefore, they were all prepared to fight Bu Fong with all their might. The cooking began. The eyes of each Heaven Chief fell on Bu Fong. These Heaven Chief were all immortal chefs. Among them, there were many monstrous geniuses. Some of them had persisted for a long time to take the second-grade Heaven Chief test, just to amaze the world. In the audience stand, many people noticed that the atmosphere wasn't right. They couldn't help but ask. No matter where Owner Bu goes, he will become the focus of others. As the focus, of course, some people will want to cover his sharpness. Gong Shu Ban smiled. However, those who want to cover his sharpness will eventually be torn into pieces by Owner Bu's sharpness. Yeah, so what happens next should be interesting. Facing the needle-like gazes around, of course, Bu Fong didn't mind. Actually, at this moment, he was a little excited. His eyes glanced at Realm Lord Dit, who was craning his neck to watch him curiously. That strange look made Realm Lord Dit's pores shrink. Bu Fong, this kid, what does he want to do? He retracted his gaze. Bu Fong's mind flickered. The fiery heart cabbages appeared in front of him, placed on the table. Reaching his hand, he brushed his waist. The white tiger heaven stove fell. It was as if a tiger's roar echoed, spreading and suppressing the other Heaven Chiefs' minds. The white tiger was arrogant, its pressure spreading everywhere. The dragon bone kitchen knife flashed with gold light. Bu Fong held it in his hand. Spinning around, he began to process the fiery heart cabbages. The outer layer of the fiery heart cabbages was peeled off, revealing a scarlet flame burning inside. Besides cabbages, he needed meat to make the dry pot. Among the meat here, Bu Fong chose the streaky pork of the 8 treasures pig. Dishes cooked with this kind of meat would have a rich aroma, which was especially tempting. He cut the streaky pork into slices, put some sauce, and began to soak the flavor. After that, he put the cabbages into a porcelain bowl, poured salt water, and began to wash them. After washing them, Bu Fong began to prepare the ingredients. He needed to prepare a lot of ingredients. The abyssal chili sauce was essential. The exploding flame pepper was cut into pieces, the purple garlic was diced, the scale-tail scallion, and the sun mother ginger were all prepared. After everything was prepared, Bu Fong flicked his fingers, flicking the white flame into the white tiger heaven stove. It made the flame flourish. The black turtle constellation wok was placed on the stove, heating the wok. After pouring the life water, thick vitality filled the air. In the distance, many people smacked their lips when they smelled the vitality that was dispersing in the air. This wastrel, that's the life water. Realm Lord Dit beat his chest and stamped his feet. The life water was such a precious, immortal material, and he used it to blanch water. In the black turtle constellation wok, the water began to boil. Bu Fong put the torn cabbages into the wok. When the fiery heart cabbages slightly changed color, Bu Fong used a basket to fish out all the cabbages, put them aside, and drain them. On the other side, in front of everyone's eyes, he poured out all the life water. Poured out, Realm Lord Dit's eyeballs were about to pop out. He actually wasted the life water like this. Did he know how precious the life water was? Of course, Bu Fong had no idea about this. After all, he had the source of the spring of life. To him, the life water was inexhaustible. Naturally, he couldn't understand Realm Lord Dit's heartache. Sizzle. He poured some hot oil into the black turtle constellation wok. When the oil was boiling hot, he added the exploding flame pepper and began to stir-fry. After stir-frying, he added the purple garlic and other ingredients. After stir-frying, he added the streaky pork. Sizzle, sizzle. Steam rose, and a meaty aroma filled the air. The surrounding people all took in deep breaths. Solemnly looking at Bu Fong's position, feeling the pressure, they began to cook the dishes in their hands seriously. Since they wanted to challenge Bu Fong, they naturally had to show the corresponding strength. Otherwise, they would become a joke. The streaky pork was stir-fried in the wok. After stir-frying, the aroma came out, and the meat slightly changed color. Then, good wine was poured in to enhance the flavor, making the aroma even more enticing. The drained fiery heart cabbages were put into the black turtle constellation wok. After stir-frying evenly, he added the abyssal chili sauce and stir-frying again. After stir-frying until a thick aroma came out, he added vinegar and other seasonings. Then he turned off the heat, tossing the wok. The dish rolled in the wok, emitting a sparkling radiance. The silver lotus pot was prepared by Bu Fong. This time, Bu Fong prepared 3 lotus pots, pouring the stir-fried dish into them. The dried pot cabbages were cooked. Of course, Bu Fong still had some operations that he hadn't finished. Around him, the other contestants had also finished their dishes. Thunder rumbled unceasingly in the sky. All the contestants had begun to cross the tribulation. Many people found that Bu Fong's dish hadn't crossed the tribulation yet. Did the great demon make a mistake? It's possible. If it can't cross the tribulation, it means that this dish is unqualified. Our chance is here. The chance to crush the great demon is here. The contestants who were watching Bu Fong in the surroundings all looked excited. Crushing the great demon would make him famous in the Heaven Chief realm. This was full of temptation to anyone. Bu Fong took a dry pot. His mind flickered. A piece of life crystal fruit appeared in his hand. His mental force surged, and the powerful mental force in his head gushed out. It enveloped the life crystal fruit, carving the gourmet array inside. Shortly after, the gourmet array was carved. Then he put the life crystal fruit into the black turtle constellation wok. In just a moment, the life crystal fruit fused into it. The radiance of the array flashed for a while, then disappeared. Rumble. In the sky, the lightning punishment surged. Dark clouds rolled over. In just a moment, it covered the entire sky. Thunder boomed. Thick lightning bolts rolled out from the layers of clouds. The other lightning punishments were overshadowed. Instantly, the pressure of the lightning punishment scattered the tribulation clouds. Everybody was completely dumbfounded. The contestants, who thought they had hope, heard the sound of their hearts breaking. A single bolt of lightning punishment had dispersed their tribulation clouds. What did this mean? It meant that the quality of the great demon's dish had completely crushed them. Everybody took in a breath of cold air, feeling a wave of frustration. When the tribulation clouds scattered, it meant that they had completely failed the test, because the dish hadn't crossed the tribulation yet. At this moment, they didn't have the mood to compete with the great demon anymore. All they had left was the despair of being crushed by the great demon. Boom, 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 boom. 7 bolts of lightning punishment fell in a row. After Xiao Bai had resisted them, the contestants didn't have the mood to compete anymore. Only now did they understand how stupid it was to want to crush the great demon. The great demon was King Invincible. Boom! The last bolt of lightning punishment scattered. Bufang's vermilion robe fluttered. His playful eyes swept over, falling on Realm Lord Dit in the distance. He said softly, "Dried pot cabbage done." Buzz, the silver pot in Bufang's hand, emitted a strange wave of energy. That wave diffused. Everyone's faces changed. Realm Lord Dit's face turned red, and his eyes widened. Bufang, this kid, is he crazy? He actually cooked a perishing pot? Does he want to blow me up so he can inherit my art of nudity? Chapter 1181. Realm Lord Dit once thought that Bufang wanted to blow him up so that he could inherit his art of nudity. Otherwise, how could Bufang really cook a great killing weapon like the perishing pot? How could Realm Lord Dit not know how terrible the power of the perishing pot was? Even a little saint would be killed by it. Now, was Bufang going to give him a perishing pot to eat? Realm Lord Dit's face turned red. He only asked Bufang to cook the perishing pot, not to destroy it. The people around them were frightened when they sensed the terrible power contained in the perishing pot in Bufang's hand. This was because they could sense an incomparably terrifying power within it. That power made them unable to summon the slightest intention to resist. They didn't know that Bufang had a great killing weapon like the perishing pot. Otherwise, they would have run away long ago instead of craning their necks to watch curiously. However, many people present knew the power of the perishing pot. They had all seen it with their own eyes. For example, Meng Qi and Gong Shu Ban. Meng Qi rolled her eyes, but she was rolling her eyes at Realm Lord Dit. If you don't court death, you won't die. This was exactly what Realm Lord Dit meant. Why did he ask Bufang to cook a perishing pot? He knew that Bufang's perishing pot could wipe out a small world, but he still wanted to feel despair. Now, the perishing pot was enough to satisfy him. Gong Shu Ban's body and mind were trembling. Boo! Owner Boo is crazy. Gong Shu Ban's lips trembled slightly. Gong Shu Ban's lips trembled slightly. He didn't believe it. He didn't dare to believe that Bufang really took out a perishing pot. Could it be? Gong Shu Ban's pupils shrank as he looked at Bufang's cold face. Was Owner Boo angered by Realm Lord Dit's test question? Was he going to bomb everything? No matter how they thought about it, they couldn't figure out what was going on. Even Realm Lord Dit, who didn't believe that Bufang would take out a perishing pot, shivered. What if that thing was real? Then what about eating? Or not? The other participants didn't have as many emotions as World Lord did. The only emotion left in these people was despair. The fear and despair of being dominated by Bufang. A bolt of lightning smashed down, scattering their thunderclouds. The talents of these chefs were not bad, and some of them were monstrous geniuses. However, compared to Bufang, the so-called monstrous genius was simply too lacking. This could be seen from this competition. The quality of a dish and the level of the chef could be seen from the lightning punishment triggered by the dish. Apart from Bufang's dish, the other dishes that participated in the test attracted at most 2 lightning punishments. Merely 2 lightning punishments. He was too weak in front of Bufang. No wonder the tribulation clouds were scattered. The result was obvious. It shone brightly and shrouded the 3 dishes. Buzz, the spirit of the heaven tree, was becoming more and more real. It could be seen that the heaven tree was in a good state. The light from the branches of the heaven tree showed that Bufang's dish had reached the level of a 2nd-grade heaven chief. Now it was time to taste the food. The 3 judges would taste it in person, which would make it more fair. Bufang stood calmly in the distance. Realm Lord Di Tai and the other 2 looked at each other, speechless. For a moment, the atmosphere became a little awkward. Everyone's eyes fell on them curiously. As the judges, they couldn't just not eat the food. Taste it. My dried pot cabbage won't disappoint you. Isn't there someone who can't wait to taste the dried pot? Bufong said. Realm Lord Dit looked at the lotus pot in front of him, which was blooming with silver light. He was a little reluctant. City Lord Meng Qi didn't say anything. She just gave Bufong a deep look. Then, she grabbed a pair of chopsticks on the table. With a gentle tap, she dived into the dried pot, picked up a glossy cabbage leaf, and put it in her mouth. This cabbage leaf was the result of Bufong blanching with the spring of life and stir-frying it. Crunch! The cabbage was boiling hot. As soon as it entered her mouth, the aroma of meat filled her mouth. The fiery heart cabbage tasted good. It was crispy, and the streaky meat of the 8 treasures pig complemented each other. City Lord Meng Qi's eyes lit up. She didn't expect the dried pot cabbage to be so delicious. The aroma was strong, and the texture was pure. This dried pot cabbage didn't disappoint her. She grabbed the chopsticks and stirred them in the dried pot. Under the dried pot, a white flame was burning, keeping the dish in a boiling state. This was actually the charm of the dried pot. As time passed, the aroma of the soup boiled under the roasting flame, causing the fragrance to burst out. She flipped the chopsticks, and the scalding dish underneath was flipped up. Steaming hot air surged up. There was a loud bang. The immortal energy of the dried pot cabbage, which wasn't obvious, suddenly spread out, turning into 6 long dragons that hovered above the cabbage. 6 strands of immortal energy. When everyone saw this, they were shocked and sucked in a breath of cold air. 6 strands of immortal energy meant that Bufong's dried pot cabbage was a 6th-grade immortal dish. The contestants were all dumbfounded. It was really infuriating to compare with others. While they were still working hard to cook a 4th-grade immortal dish, Bufong could easily cook a 6th-grade immortal dish. They weren't on the same level at all. They felt a little frustrated and helpless. Gongshu Baiguang was curious when he saw Meng Qi flip 6 strands of immortal energy with just 1 chopstick. He also grabbed the chopsticks and flipped the dried pot cabbage. Sizzle. The soup underneath was boiling, but steam and immortal energy surged up at the same time. Immortal energy also gushed out. For a moment, the top of the dried pot was colorful and beautiful, attracting everyone's attention. Gongshu Baiguang picked up the cabbage and streaky pork and put them in his mouth. The crispy cabbage and the soft and fragrant streaky pork made Gongshu Baiguang nod with satisfaction. When Realm Lord Dit saw City Lord Meng Qi and Gongshu Baiguang eating so happily, he couldn't help but have some thoughts. Maybe Bufong was just trying to scare him. How could he take out a great killing weapon like the perishing pot so easily? With this thought in mind, Realm Lord Dit's eyes became more playful. He remembered that when Bufong tricked the 2 little saint, wasn't it the same? Naughty Bufong, my little friend. Realm Lord Dit laughed. He pointed a finger at Bufong and shook it. He believed that the simple and upright owner wouldn't take out the terrifying perishing pot. So, Realm Lord Dit couldn't wait to reach out his chopsticks. Although his dried pot gave people a different feeling, but the tempting fragrance emitted from the dried pot made Realm Lord Dit a little unable to control himself. As long as he didn't die from the explosion, he would eat it. Grabbing the chopsticks, Realm Lord Dit reached for the dried pot. However, just as his chopsticks were about to fall, Realm Lord Dit suddenly raised his head and saw Bufong's interested gaze. His scalp went numb. However, he didn't hesitate for too long. He picked up a piece of streaky pork, which was soft and fragrant. Realm Lord Dit's eyes suddenly lit up. Delicious. Delicious. Realm Lord Dit continued to pick up the meat with his chopsticks. The perishing pot didn't move, which made Realm Lord Dit's tense heart calm down. How could Bufong be the kind of person who didn't know his limits? Realm Lord Dit ate happily. Suddenly, the corners of Bufong's mouth twitched. He looked at Realm Lord Dit curiously. Although he didn't draw the exploding gourmet array in the perishing pot, Bufong had drawn the imprisoned array in it. Of course, the dried pot wasn't the best carrier for the imprisoned array, but it could still play a little role. So, under everyone's puzzled eyes, Bu Fong raised his palm. Bu Fong's action touched everyone's heart. Realm Lord Dit's body froze, and he suddenly had a feeling of uneasiness. Subconsciously, he looked at Bu Fong, who seemed to have a playful smile on his paralyzed face. Damn it! Imprison! Bu Fong snapped his fingers, his face expressionless. As his voice faded, the sound of his fingers snapping was crisp and sweet. Everyone was dumbfounded. The next moment, boom! The perishing pot in front of Realm Lord Dit suddenly burst into a dazzling white light. This feeling, City Lord Mengqi and Gongshu Baiguang's mouths twitched, and their figures instantly fled far away. They avoided the place where Baiguang shone. Realm Lord Dit couldn't dodge at all. He was directly blinded by Baiguang's light and shrouded in it. When Baiguang dispersed, Realm Lord Dit's figure appeared. There was no earth-shattering explosion, no terrifying destructive fluctuations. That Baiguang was like a flash in the pan, and it didn't change anything. Realm Lord Dit pursed his lips, straightened his neck, and raised his hand, grabbing the chopsticks. The chopsticks were holding a piece of fragrant and hot streaky pork, and he was about to put it into his mouth. There was even a glistening oil flowing on the meat, and the fragrance filled the air. The delicacy was right in front of him, but Realm Lord Dit couldn't move. He could only smell the fragrance of the meat, which kept drilling into his nostrils and teasing him. His body couldn't move at all, and he was completely frozen on the spot, as if he was petrified. What happened? Why didn't the Realm Lord eat the meat? The gourmet array imprisoned. Looking at the situation, it should have restricted his movements. Looking at Realm Lord Dit's funny actions, Bu Fong couldn't help but smile. Eat, Realm Lord. Eat, Bu Fong said. Realm Lord Dit's eyes turned, and he maintained his posture. He wanted to move, but he couldn't. He could only curse in his heart. He finally understood that he was wrong. He once thought that Bu Fong wanted to kill him, but that wasn't the case. Bu Fong wanted to suffocate him to death, so that he could inherit his naked art. Chapter 1182. The confinement array wouldn't last for a long time. Of course, this was under the premise that he didn't eat the dish that carried the confinement. Once he ate the dish that carried the array, the confinement time, which wasn't considered long, would be extended. Realm Lord Dit was in such a state at the moment. According to Bu Fong's current cultivation base, if the dish that carried the confinement burst out, it could at most confine the little saint for a dozen breaths of time. However, if the little saint ate the delicacy in the array, the confinement time would become very long. Realm Lord Dit wanted to cry, but he couldn't say anything. This confinement was an all-around confinement. His body couldn't move, his eyes couldn't blink, and his mouth couldn't even speak. After opening his eyes for a long time, Realm Lord Dit felt a sour taste spreading in his eyes. He wanted to cry. He had an uncontrollable urge to cry. The sourness in his eyes made tears roll in his eyes. The dried pot wouldn't explode, which made many people feel at ease. City Lord Mengqi and Gongshu Baiguang, who had run far away, also came back. Looking at Realm Lord Dit, who was still holding the streaky pork, their faces became very strange. Now, as long as they weren't fools, they knew that there was definitely something fishy in Bu Fong's dish. At least, Realm Lord Dit's dried pot had something fishy. Although it wasn't an explosion, it seemed its power wasn't ordinary. Didn't they see that Realm Lord Dit was about to cry? The great demon was indeed unfathomable. If Realm Lord Dit could speak now, he would definitely curse at this group of people. Anyone would cry if they stared at it for a long time without blinking. Okay. Cough, cough. Because Realm Lord His Highness had temporarily fallen into a mysterious state of enlightenment. This time's second-grade Heaven Chief assessment, I, the City Lord, announce that it is now over. There is one person who has successfully become a second-grade Heaven Chief. Gongshu Baiguang coughed dryly. He first looked at Realm Master Dit. He looked at Bu Fong again and finally said, and it was Bu Fong who announced that he would eventually become the second-class Heaven Chief. The great Demon King had become a second-grade immortal chef. The surrounding people sucked in a breath of cold air and exclaimed. It had been less than half a year since Bufong became an immortal chef. Bufong's breakthrough speed was so fast that he had created a record in the Heaven Chief realm. The champion of the Heaven Chief competition, the Great Demon, had astonishing talent. Although everyone was shocked, they weren't too surprised. They only gave their heartfelt blessings. They weren't jealous because towards the Great Demon, all they felt was reverence, not jealousy. Bufong touched his chin. It was not difficult for him to become a rank 2 Heaven Chief. It was only natural that he would become a second-grade immortal chef. Facing the envious gazes from all around, Bufong's face didn't change. For him now, the level of a second-grade Heaven Chief was not enough. He could try to break through to the rank 3 Heaven Chief. This was the purpose of his participation in today's assessment. The rank 3 Heaven Chief needed to be able to cook dishes that contained at least 7 strands of immortal energy. The difficulty was not low. It could even be said that for the current Bufong, it was very challenging. However, Bufong was not afraid of challenges. As a god of cooking who wanted to stand at the top of the food chain in the fantasy world, Bufong was very clear that in the future, the challenges he would face would definitely be much more difficult than this time. He had to overcome all of them to have a chance to reach the peak. To become a god of cooking, this was a process of cutting through thorns, and there was no room for mistakes. Hence, Bufong chose to continue the assessment. This time, he wanted to take the rank 3 Heaven Chief test. Bufong's voice was not loud, but the content was very shocking. In an instant, the whole room quieted down. Then, the crowd thought for a long time, then confirmed Bufong's purpose. Then the pot exploded. Oh my God, what did the Great Demon say? He wants to continue the challenge. He wants to challenge to become a rank 3 Heaven Chief. Impossible. It's too difficult to become a rank 3 Heaven Chief. Even in the entire Heaven Chief world, there are not many rank 3 Heaven Chief. The surrounding people were all shocked by Bufong's words. After a moment of silence, they opened their mouths. Everyone's face revealed a look of horror, and they sucked in a breath of cold air. No wonder he was the Great Demon. His way of doing things was really arrogant. Of course, there were only a few people who had high hopes for Bufong, mainly because the rank 3 Heaven Chief was not as easy as the rank 2 Heaven Chief. It could be said that the rank 3 Heaven Chief was already a high-ranking person among the Heaven Chief. And Bufong had just become a rank 2 Heaven Chief, and now he wanted to challenge the rank 3 Heaven Chief? This was a little irritable. Realm Lord Dit, who was unable to move, also trembled. Obviously, he was also a little surprised by Bufong's decision. City Lord Mengqi and Gongshu Baiguang looked at each other, seeing the surprise in each other's eyes. Of course, they originally wanted to ask for Realm Lord Dit's opinion. However, seeing that Realm Lord Dit was still maintaining his posture, the words that were stuck in their throats once again shrank back. All right, with your strength, it's not impossible for you to challenge the rank 3 Heaven Chief. Even if you fail, there's no harm. City Lord Mengqi suddenly opened her mouth. Her words shocked everyone present. Everyone widened their eyes in shock. The rank 3 Heaven Chief's assessment is not like the rank 2 Heaven Chief's assessment. The rank 3 Heaven Chief cultivation base must pass first, followed by the level of mental force. Only when both of these are passed can one be qualified to take the rank 3 Heaven Chief's assessment. Mengqi's pleasant voice resounded through the entire room. Her beautiful eyes fell on Bufong's body as she said with a smile. Bufong naturally didn't flinch, looking back at her. Bufong's current cultivation base and mental force met the requirements. After the breakthrough, Bufong's cultivation base and mental force had increased by leaps and bounds. Mengqi's words fell. The corners of Bufong's mouth twitched. Many people thought that Mengqi's words intended to make Bufong retreat. Although many people knew that the Great Demon could become stronger, they didn't know what cultivation base Bufong had reached. Many people's understanding of Bufong was still stuck at the one-star true immortal realm, immortal chef. Bufong's mind flickered. A moment later, his spirit, sea, suddenly surged with great waves. His body emitted a terrifying aura, stirring up wild waves that scattered in all directions. The vermilion robe also turned scarlet, as if there was a bird's cry echoing unceasingly. In just a moment, everyone's faces changed. Their bodies seemed to be pressed by a heavy pressure. They all took in a breath of cold air. That pressure was like a giant rock. Everyone was bewildered. It turned out that the great demon's cultivation base had reached such a terrifying level without them noticing. Munchi's eyes flashed. She was a little shocked. Good. In that case, let's continue the rank 3 Heaven Chief's assessment. City Lord Ming-Chi said. Gongshu Baiguang, of course, had no objection. The aura from Bufong made his heart palpitate. Thus, he didn't dare to deny Bufong, and he didn't have the right to deny Bufong. Then, it was time to continue the rank 3 Heaven Chief's assessment. The people who had planned to leave also looked fanatical, gazing at Bufong, who was preparing to cook again in the arena. The rank 3 Heaven Chief's assessment didn't have a question. As long as he could cook a dish with 7 strands of immortal energy, he would pass. 7 strands of immortal energy. To Bufong, it wasn't a difficult thing. Bufong's face didn't change. His hand shook. A dragon roar echoed, and the dragon bone kitchen knife fell into his hand. Earth Prison, Goddess City, there was a loud bang. The city gate of Goddess City opened. A figure shot out like a bullet and sat straight on the ground. He bounced a few times and smashed several deep pits on the ground. The white-haired, childlike old Tai, who was curled up behind a large rock and dozing off with his head twisted, was instantly startled. He raised his head, looking at the place where the loud noise came from. In the next moment, he eagerly ran over. He saw Hades' Era rubbing his butt, getting up from the ground. Nether King Air, was a little gloomy. Wasn't he just staying in Goddess City a little longer? As a brother and sister who weren't related by blood, Empress by Luo didn't need to kick him out without giving him any face. It made him, the Lord of the Netherworld, lose face. He took out a spicy strip, putting it on the corner of his mouth. Hades' Era patted his body, standing up. He happened to see Tai. Oh, Tai, you haven't left yet? You've been waiting for so long outside the city gate. Hades' Era asked in surprise. Old Tai smiled bitterly. My Lord Nether King, you are finally willing to come out. As a man, Tai naturally couldn't enter Goddess City. He wasn't like Hades' Era, who was shamelessly disguised as a woman. Moreover, it was Hades' Era who said that he would keep watch for him. In the end, after watching for more than a month, Hades' Era finally came back. Let's go. The trip to Goddess City is over. Let's go back to Hades' Palace. We don't want that old stinky dragon to find us. He won't stop nagging us. Hades' Era said leisurely with a spicy strip in his mouth. Tai nodded excitedly. Hades' Era had finally thought it through. Although Goddess City was the land of soft jade, it wasn't suitable for Lord Hades, who had great ambitions. Lord Hades' journey was the sea of stars. Old Tai's face was red, and his fair skin was tinged with a faint blush because of his excitement. Hades' Era squinted at Tai, the corners of his mouth twitching. A moment later, his feet stomped on the ground. With a boom, he soared into the sky. Tai hurried to catch up. The two of them dashed out of Goddess City, returning to the surface of the wasteland. However, as soon as they returned to the surface, suddenly, he felt a sharp gaze coming from afar. The white-haired Long was wearing a long black robe. He held the hollow eye staff, standing proudly in the sky. His face was as cold as water. As soon as Hades' Era came out, he met Long's eyes. The atmosphere was a little awkward. Tai hurriedly lowered his head and didn't dare to say a word. Your Excellency Hades, Goddess City is a forbidden land, and you can't come into contact with it at will. The Forbidden Lands are all heretics, but we're not strong enough. If we were strong enough, we could eradicate all these heretics, whether it's God Vanishing Mountain, the Black Temple, or the Cave of the Fallen Gods. Long's face was as dark as water. He swung the staff in the air, and a terrible fluctuation burst out. Hades' era held the spicy strip in his mouth and twitched the corner of his mouth. The reason why the Forbidden Lands are called Forbidden Lands is because they are all failures, the ones who were eliminated by history. They should have disappeared in the torrent of history, but they shrank in a corner, struggling at death's door. They covet everything that once belonged to them. They are murderers. They are the source of destruction. Tian Tsang fell because he was soft-hearted toward the Forbidden Lands. Do you want to repeat the same mistake? The old dragon told Tian Tsang not to have anything to do with the Forbidden Lands, and he even told him to flatten them before attacking Nether Prison. But he didn't listen, so he suffered a disaster. That's why he fell. Do you want to be like your father, Tian Tsang? The more Yinglong spoke, the angrier he became, and his voice grew louder and louder. The eye of the void suddenly smashed down, causing the entire void to tremble. Hades' era's face was as dark as still water. He took a deep breath and didn't say a word. Don't talk about my father. I'm me. Nether King Erha indifferently glanced at Yinglong. Then, he grabbed the collar of old Tai, who was already trembling. In the next instant, his figure turned into a jet of black light, exploding. He suddenly shot out, disappearing into the horizon. Yinglong's old face looked at the Nether King's disappearing figure and could not help but sigh. Your Excellency Hades, grow up quickly. The prosperity created by the old Hades has begun to decline. The 9 clans of Nether Prison are ready to make trouble. If an army comes to our borders, how will Earth Prison resist? Yinglong murmured in a low voice. Suddenly, hovering in the void, Yinglong focused his eyes, looking at the wasteland below. The yellow sand in the wasteland suddenly moved and turned into a huge vortex. The vortex cracked. A graceful figure of absolute beauty slowly stepped out of it. Yinglong sucked in a cold breath. Staring at the graceful figure, his face was unfriendly. The city lord of Goddess City. The spokesperson of God Vanishing Mountain by Luo. Old Yinglong's eyes narrowed. He held his scepter horizontally, and pitch-black nether energy swirled around him. The great paths will of the great paths surged and gathered on the hollow eye. It seemed to turn into a towering mountain, pressing down on the female King Biluo as she walked out of the wasteland. Chapter 1183. In the middle of the wasteland, a beautiful figure swayed as she stepped out of the wasteland. Facing this figure, Yinglong, who was hovering in the void, tensed up. He didn't dare to be careless. He waved the hollow eye staff in his hand, stirring up a gust of wind. A terrifying pressure, which carried the will of the great path of hell, pressed down. The female king, Biluo, walked out of the wasteland. She held an ice cream cone in her hand, sticking out her delicate tongue to lick it. Facing the pressure that was like a towering mountain, the female king Biluo raised her hand, gently patting the void. Immediately, a hole was torn open in the towering mountain-like pressure. Yinglong only felt a myriad of nether aura converging into a palm, slapping towards him. Female King Biluo, what do you want to do? Yinglong roared. The hollow eye staff pounded the void. Instantly, the nether energy around him rose like a storm, turning into a defense. He wanted to resist the female king Biluo's slap. With a boom, a violent explosion erupted. Thousands of nether energy scattered. The female king Biluo licked her ice cream cone, her beautiful face indifferently looking at Yinglong. I'm so annoyed to see a stinky dragon like you. I've said it before. As long as you step into Goddess City's territory, I'll beat you up. Have you forgotten? The female king Biluo sneered coldly. Yinglong held the hollow eye staff with one hand, the muscles on his face twitching. A moment later, his body twisted as if he had crossed the void. He raised his palm again, and thousands of nether energy gathered. Then he flung it at old Yinglong. Yinglong resisted for a while, then turned around and left. His tone was a little flustered and exasperated. A forbidden land should have the awareness of being a forbidden land. You guys are the losers and eliminated in history. You should have disappeared with the passage of time. Inglong said. With a sweep of the void scepter, a beam of light shot out, colliding with the female King Biluo's attack. Then, Inglong was sent flying, his figure gradually disappearing. Since you're afraid, then just hide in a corner and don't think about anything else. Otherwise, what should disappear will eventually disappear. Inglong's figure disappeared, but his voice turned into stars and drifted over. The female King Biluo stood in the air. Her long and straight legs were filled with temptation. King Biluo took a bite of the ice cream cone and looked at Inglong's disappearing figure with a pout. With a soft snort, his figure descended once again. Yellow sand swallowed him, causing the land to once again turn into a wasteland. Rumble. Lightning collapse. Everyone was shocked. An oppressive aura quietly dissipated, and the clouds that filled the void brought a stifling feeling to everyone. Finally, the black cloud disappeared. Everybody turned to look at the arena. There, a figure held a ladle and sprinkled it. Instantly, the oily juice splashed on the dish, making a sizzling sound. A fragrant aroma diffused from the ladle, spreading to the entire arena. 1 wisp of immortal energy, 2 wisps of immortal energy, 3 wisps of immortal energy, 7 strands of immortal energy rose up like bamboo shoots after the rain. They filled the entire sky and lingered above the dish, causing it to emit a dazzling light. On the arena, Xiaobai landed, holding the war god's stick. Sizzling lightning arcs moved, making Xiaobai's aura stronger. Bufang took out a clean white cloth, wiping the water on the edge of the blue and white porcelain plate. Then he wiped his hands. Picking up the dish, the 3rd grade Heaven Chief's test dish was completed. Bufang furrowed his brows. Actually, he wasn't satisfied with his performance this time. Perhaps he didn't expect that his current cultivation base could barely reach the 3rd grade Heaven Chief's level. He thought it would be easy to cook a dish with 7 wisps of immortal energy. However, when he tried to cook it, he found out how difficult it was. Fortunately, he succeeded this time. However, since this dish had just reached the 3rd grade Heaven Chief's level, its quality wasn't as good as the dry pot cabbage. It had only triggered 4 lightning punishments. It was also the reason why Bufang wasn't satisfied with his performance this time. He exhaled softly. Bufang understood that although his cooking skills had improved, he still needed more practice. He still had a long way to go before he could reach the peak of cooking. The further he went, the harder it would be to improve his cooking skills, and he would have to overcome more obstacles and difficulties. The dish was brought to the judge's table. Realm Lord Dit finally broke the confinement right before Bufang finished cooking. He was so touched that he wanted to cry. His eyes were sore. When Bufang brought the dish, the steaming hot dish attracted many people's eyes. Actually, the role of the judges was just to go through the motions. The immortal energy on the dish didn't seem fake, which meant that Bufang had become the 3rd grade Heaven Chief. Naturally, there was no mishap. Although Bufang's dish was amazing, it lacked the charm of the dry pot cabbage he had cooked before. However, this didn't prevent Bufang from becoming the 3rd grade Heaven Chief. When Realm Lord Dit announced the news with his teeth clenched, the entire room exploded. It wasn't hard to imagine that this news would sweep across the entire Heaven Chief world like a whirlwind. The Great Demon made another shocking move. He rose 2 grades, becoming the 3rd grade Heaven Chief. After becoming the 3rd grade Heaven Chief, Bufang said a few words to City Lord Mengqi and Realm Lord Dit, then turned around and left. Of course, it was under the resentful eyes of Realm Lord Dit. Walking out of the room, Bufang put his hands in his pockets, frowning as he thought about his shortcomings. He recalled the places where he could improve in the cooking process. Bufang still needed to find the carrier of the confinement array. Although the dried pot was good, it was more suitable as the carrier of the explosive array. Leaving the room for the test, Bufang headed to the Immortal Chef test. Cici should still be in the test. Although Bufang had confidence in Cici, he still wanted to see the little girl become the Heaven Chief with his own eyes. He pushed the door open. Bu Fong clasped his hands, stepped in, and quietly found a place to sit down. Bu Fong's entrance didn't attract anyone's attention. At this moment, everyone's attention was on the arena. On the arena, several chefs were cooking. These chefs were neither too old nor too young, about 12 or 13 years old, and some were even 14 or 15. And Cici, who looked 7 or 8 years old, was quite young. She even needed a chair to support her to reach the stove. Bu Fong suddenly fell silent. The other contestants were using immortal tools with immortal energy lingering around them. Cici, on the other hand, was cooking with ordinary kitchen utensils provided by the Heaven Chief Hall. It might not be obvious when cooking, but in the test, it was obvious that the little girl's equipment was inferior. This made Bu Fong frown. It seemed that after this test, he needed to prepare cooking utensils for Cici. As the Heaven Chief, how could he not have good cooking utensils? Even Bu Fong himself had the god of cooking set. It was difficult for a chef without good cooking utensils to reach the top. Of course, Bu Fong was just a little unhappy to see Cici being suppressed. In the arena, several boys sneered at Cici. Seeing that Cici was cooking with ordinary cooking utensils provided by the Heaven Chief Hall, they couldn't help but laugh. Cici pursed her lips, stubbornly ignoring them. Because she wasn't tall enough, Cici stood on a chair to cook. Her small face was a little red from the smoke. Cici wants to become a powerful Heaven Chief, like Teacher Bu. Even if she doesn't have cooking utensils, she can still be powerful. Cici pouted, stubbornly waving the kitchen knife in her hand to process the ingredients. Sizzle, sizzle. The other children threw the ingredients into the wok, causing the wok to emit smoke, and the aroma filled the air. Soon, everyone's cooking was coming to an end. With the help of the immortal tools, their cooking speed was much faster. Cici was a little anxious. Seeing that the others had finished cooking while her dish was still cooking, she was naturally a little flustered. Little girl, you're not even as tall as the stove. Why are you learning to cook? Go back and do your embroidery. A little boy grinned, looking at Cici, who was blushing, and suddenly laughed. He didn't hide his mockery. These children were all from different levels of the Heaven Chief realm. They were all talented and had rich resources. Hence, it wasn't difficult for them to pass the immortal chef test. Perhaps because they grew up in the aristocratic families, they were used to being arrogant and domineering. Naturally, they didn't hide their disdain for the weak. That's right. In their eyes, Cici was a weakling. Didn't she see that the little girl was not as tall as the stove? Why did this kind of person join in the fun? This little girl, who hadn't even grown her hair, wanted to become the Heaven Chief? The Heaven Chief wasn't that cheap. Rumble. In the sky, thunder and lightning surged. These kids' cooking skills were not bad. They could actually trigger the lightning punishment. With a rumbling sound, the lightning punishment fell. These kids from different levels of the aristocratic families all used their skills to resist the lightning punishment. Give up. Look, your dish isn't cooked yet. The little boy carried the dish, walked past Cici, and suddenly laughed. Cici's red face jerked up, somewhat indignantly glaring at the little boy. All of a sudden, a trace of panic flashed across Cici's face. The chair under her feet couldn't stand steadily, and she twisted and fell. With a thud, she fell directly to the ground. The laughter around became louder and louder. This comical scene made the scions of the aristocratic families feel that it was extremely funny. This time, the judge of the immortal chef test wasn't the one who had brought Cici in. Thus, they didn't know that Cici was the apprentice chef of Bu Fong, the great demon. When they saw Cici's appearance, they all furrowed their brows, somewhat dissatisfied. Apparently, they also thought that a 7-year-old girl coming to take the immortal chef test was simply a troublemaker. How could a 7-year-old girl become an immortal chef? Moreover, she didn't even have any cooking utensils. Attention, all contestants. The test is over. Those who haven't finished cooking don't struggle anymore. Don't waste everyone's time. A judge leaned back in his chair, exhaled, and said calmly. He was most dissatisfied with Cici's mischief. I haven't finished cooking. Why is the test over? There's no time limit for the test. Cici's voice came from under the stove, sounding a little like she was about to cry. Then, the sound of chairs being turned over could be heard. Apparently, the judge felt that he had lost face after being contradicted by a 7-year-old girl, so he was a little angry. He directly slapped the table and shouted angrily, "I said the test is over, so it's over. Am I the judge, or are you the judge? Impudent." The other children on the stage were also frightened by the judge's appearance. However, most of them were gloating because they had finished cooking. Obviously, the target of the judge's reprimand was Cece, who wasn't even as tall as the stove. On the stove, Little Who's eyes widened, and his white fur stood on end. He stared at the judge, puffing his cheeks. Obviously, he was also very angry. Cece straightened the chair, climbed up, and poked her head out. "Cece, you must finish cooking." Teacher Boo said that Cece can become the heaven chief. Cece pursed her lips, almost crying. However, she still waved the ladle and continued to cook. "You little girl, you're really annoying. Not only did you bring a pet into the test, but you also deliberately wasted everyone's time. Look at what you have. What qualifications do you have to compete with everyone? You don't have any kitchenware, and your kitchen knife is borrowed from the Heaven Chief Hall. What makes you think you can become the Heaven Chief?" The judge was really a little impatient. Their gazes turned cold. He stood up, stretched out his finger, and pointed at Cece, who was on the stage. He scolded, "I order you to come down now. Otherwise, you will be disqualified from the test, disqualified from next month's test, or even the month after that." The other contestants on the stage didn't even dare to breathe loudly. However, when they looked at Cece, they couldn't help but reveal a mocking smile. Of course, the other judges frowned. They were also somewhat dissatisfied with the judge bullying a 7-year-old girl. However, because of the judge's identity, no one said anything. It was not worth offending someone from an aristocratic family for a 7-year-old girl. Moreover, someone recognized that this person was the Heaven Chief of the aristocratic family from the 5th floor of Heaven Chief Realm. "I told you to come down. Do you hear me?" The judge's eyes narrowed, and he shouted. Cece was so scared that the ladle in her hand trembled. Her eyes were filled with tears. All of a sudden, a series of footsteps rang out in the quiet room. Everyone was bewildered. They couldn't help but turn their heads to look at the audience. That judge was even more hot-tempered. He turned his head and shouted, walking around in the examination room, "Get out of here." However, as soon as he said that, the judge's eyes shrank, because a young man in a striped red and white chef robe had appeared in front of him, his face expressionless. Raising his hand, he didn't say a word, but slapped the judge's face. Slap! A clear and melodious sound echoed in the entire examination room. Everyone was dumbfounded. The other judges were dumbstruck. The contestants on the stage also dropped their jaws. One contestant couldn't hold his dish properly. With a clang, the dish fell to the ground, splashing everywhere. Instantly, he was dumbstruck. Cece's eyes were filled with tears. Finally, she saw Bufong. The grievance in her heart exploded, and she burst into tears. "King dare to hit me? Who are you? Do you want to die?" After a moment of bewilderment, the judge exploded, roaring, his eyes bloodshot. Bufong's eyes moved away from Cece, feeling a little sorry for her. He glanced at the judge, but he still didn't say anything. Then he slapped him again. If one slap wasn't enough, he would slap him again. The judge's nose started to bleed. His eyes were filled with fire, and his true energy surged as his anger burned. Bufong retracted his hand, gently swinging it. "Who do you think you are? How dare you scold my apprentice like that? Who do you think you are?" You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.